Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1389 of the War News stream. And today we have very big news out of every place around the world. We have seen that Russia suffered major damage amid a missile attack by Ukraine tonight. We've also seen U.S. forces begin a major airstrike campaign on Syria in response to an attack. And also, Crimea has run out of Russian gasoline, and the crisis had reignited about the gasoline shortages. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, folks, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as unfortunate news has come out of the Syrian interim government-controlled city of Palmyra, as a U.S. counter-terrorist patrol came under an ambush today from an ISIS cell within the city of Palmyra, resulting in significant casualties and 3 dead at this moment, including 2 U.S. soldiers and a translator at this time. We do understand that medical evacuations have been conducted of the wounded involved in the convoy and the ambush to the Yatom garrison perimeter just south of the city of Palmyra by around 120 miles. There are some U.S. soldiers currently wounded or clinging to life at this moment and attempting to survive, as they've also been evacuated medically out of the area and into Germany as well. The Syrian interim government has publicly stated that there has been absolutely no involvement from the Syrian interim government's part on the attack on U.S. forces within the area, and it does appear that the United States of America's president, the President of the United States, has declared that armed action will commence against ISIS and its forces within the area, specifically within the city of Palmyra, effective immediately after the attack. At the moment, U.S. forces by land and air are conducting significant actions and strikes against ISIS forces and attempting to find and destroy any other remaining cells in the area after the attack has occurred. Additionally, we've also seen that a fire has been created at a refinery near to the city of Deir ez-Zor along the border between the Syrian Democratic Forces and the Syrian interim government. Meanwhile, the Israelis have also conducted significant airstrikes within southern Lebanon today, killing the second-in-command of the Hezbollah forces within the southern part of the country, and we've also heard that the State of Israel apparently did not inform the United States of America about what appeared to be a blatant ceasefire violation with Hamas after the Israeli Air Force conducted an airstrike onto a car carrying a Hamas official. According to the statements by the Israelis, they did not notify the United States of America about the preparations for such actions. and took the action without notifying the United States, technically making it a possible ceasefire violation. In the meantime, outside the Middle East, we have also been able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces have conducted a major counteroffensive today within the area of the city of Kupyansk. After President Volodymyr Zelensky left the area just yesterday, after meeting troops within the area and speaking to battalion and brigade commands involved in the defense of Kupyansk, we have now seen that over the course of the day, a counteroffensive has now been launched in full scale against the Russian forces inside of the city of Kupyansk, pushing the Russian Federation into an absolute breaking point within the area, as Ukrainian forces to the north of the city appear to be threatening the Russians' connection to their main lines and also the greater Russian army at large, threatening the Russians within the city with possible encirclement. This situation appears to be incredibly drastic at the moment, and a large amount of combat footage, rarely ever seen at this point in direct firefights in Ukraine, came out over the course of the day, giving us a very clear picture of what the Battle of Kupyansk is looking like on the northern flank of the city, as well as within the central area of the city itself. The Ukrainian armed forces have also conducted a major attack against Russian refineries and critical infrastructure throughout the entirety of the country, with major refineries being hit overnight along with energy infrastructure within the city of Smolensk, and two major railway derailments have occurred within southern Russia inside of the Orenburg Oblast as well as within the Penza Oblast as well, only 150 miles apart from each other and generally along the same main line. We've also heard that the Ukrainian armed forces conducted a significant attack against two Russian, well, actually we believe they're Russian or Iranian vessels that were actually conducting arms shipments from the Islamic Republic of Iran to the Russian Federation and to the city of Astrakhan and Volgograd. These vessels apparently are on fire at the moment and have suffered significant damage from these attacks. In the meantime, the Ukrainians have also conducted significant attacks on Crimea overnight, while at the same time we are also seeing that high drama is continuing within Europe, especially over the possible liquidation of Russian assets to continue to fund the war in Ukraine. The Prime Minister of Slovakia, Fico, has actually announced that he'll be attempting to intervene through the European Union's legal processes to try and stop the liquidation of assets, which will be voted on within the next 6 days within the European Union. The Federal Republic of Germany's Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has also stated that the world is starting to change and the United States of America may not necessarily be the leader of the sphere that the European Union finds itself in any longer. Meanwhile, we've also seen a significant amount of sorties and training being conducted in a joint operation by the Swedish and Finnish air forces as they continue to prepare for a possible confrontation with the Russian Federation that may happen sometime in between a year to a year and a half from now. We've also seen that the ceasefire allegations made by the President of the United States last night appear to have been completely unfactual, as significant airstrikes have continued over the course of the day by the Royal Thai Air Force, and both Thai and Cambodian forces have been conducting counterattacks against the other in attempts to try and gain ground either within their own countries or to push into the other country and make their own ground. We've also seen that the Cambodians are now closing all border crossings that were still open with Thailand at the time, while the Royal Thai Navy also announced today they will now be conducting a naval blockade of the coastline of Cambodia. The People's Republic of China's People's Liberation Army Navy and China Coast Guard has also been continuing to conduct aggressive actions against Filipino fishermen within the area of the South China Sea and the Spratly Islands. We've also been able to hear other major developments from the area of the hunt for Captain Crack Sparrow and his band of 40 thieves, as we heard that the United States Air Forces have been conducting significant operations within the area, including that of the Fleet Air Arm of the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force, and we have also seen that the Venezuelans apparently at this moment did actually show one of their command headquarters, and crazily enough, folks, they are also using Flight 24 or Flight Radar 24, much like us. Pretty impressive stuff.
Oh man, you gotta love them using Flight Radar 24. That means every single time that one of these aircraft is flying close to the Venezuelan coast, and all of a sudden there's like an estimation of it going into Venezuelan airspace, that means they are using that same system to see where these aircraft are, and they believe they're getting attacked. So that's actually backfiring on them tremendously, actually, and also scaring the hell out of them every single time, I'd imagine.
I would assume so, and it appears, folks, that they're actually turning on the transponders, probably because U.S. intelligence knows that they're using Flight Radar 24 and will see the aircraft on Flight Radar. But of course, folks, we are going to be getting into all of the major news that we have over the course of the day, starting from our largest stories first, and then working on into our smaller ones throughout the night. Of course, folks, I do have to keep in mind that we are going to be covering some incredibly unfortunate news. We do understand that a lot of our audience is largely American, and we are Americans as well, and we do have incredibly unfortunate news that has actually emerged out of the Syrian interim government's controlled territory over the course of the day, and we're going to be moving into that story first and foremost. Inside of the Syrian interim government's area of control is the city of Palmyra. Palmyra is basically, for all intents and purposes, an oasis in the middle of the desert. It quite literally exists around no real major population population centers beyond Palmyra itself. To actually show you all the current lay of the land within this area, everything in white is controlled by the Syrian interim government directly. Everything in gray has some loose Syrian interim government control within it, but it's almost a lawless land within those areas and largely uninhabited. As you can see right there, Palmyra is the only city on the road from Homs to Deir ez-Zor that sits within the middle of the desert. Unfortunately, this has also led, due to its isolation, for it to be a hotbed of potential terrorist activities. During the collapse of the Assad regime in the latter part of last year, we did see that in the midst of the desert around the city of Palmyra and other smaller cities like As-Sukna and Al-Qom, there were significant buildups of ISIS cells that were attempting to re-emerge in the midst of the anarchy that exists within the region, considering that the Assad regime's government had collapsed and the Syrian interim government hadn't made it into this area yet. We did clearly see that ISIS had not been completely destroyed back in 2018, but had simply gone into hibernation and was no longer conducting any significant attacks against coalition forces within the area that were conducting the continuation of the war on terror, or for that matter, to be able to conduct any actions beyond their mere existence. However, that has largely appeared to have changed as of recently. We have heard some intermittent reports that largely have surfaced as rumors that the Syrian interim government has been dealing with some sporadic firefights over about the past year since the liberation of this area from the Assad regime with ISIS and terrorist cells within the area. ISIS is not the only cell within this area. I do have to make it quite clear that they are not the only one, but we do consider them to probably be the most prominent from what we can understand of the terrorist groups that exist within the barren deserts of this region. Because of this, the United States of America, which generally builds and bases its forces out of the At-Tanf garrison here within the southern part of the country, which is this light green area here at the bottom, has been conducting patrols from the area and also from other U.S. bases that lie within the Syrian interim government and also within the Syrian Democratic Forces to be able to conduct anti-terrorist patrols. These patrols have been happening quite literally since about late 2018 when we technically defeated ISIS and completely destroyed their land holdings. Since then, U.S. forces have been heavily involved in conducting anti-terrorism patrols or counterinsurgency patrols, which are called COIN patrols, throughout the entirety of both sides of Syria, the Syrian interim government as well as the Syrian Democratic Forces. Today, one of those patrols, which is fairly routine, was happening within the city of Palmyra. Palmyra is not only in the middle of nowhere, it's actually quite interesting as far as its structure goes. The city is largely has been completely destroyed within its southern part. As you can see, there's practically no buildings that are left standing within this area. It was, at one point, a significant battlefield in the Syrian civil war between two of the warring factions way early on, back around 2014. When ISIS took over the area after about 2015 and on into 2018, they actually controlled the city as one of their larger holdings, including cities like Mosul and others. We then saw that the United States was able to, along with the coalition, retake this city, and the patrol was happening within the northern area of the city today, which is actually populated and built up. The city is a fairly analogous one to most cities within this region of Syria. It was mostly built in the 1960s, and due to this, a large amount of the buildings are somewhat modern by a Syrian standard, and also the city is built on a grid layout. We're not exactly sure what street the convoy was patrolling down during that time, but on one of these streets inside of the northern area of the city in the grid work, there was an ambush that was conducted by ISIS forces against the U.S. patrol that was passing through this area. From what we understand, the ambush completely caught the convoy by surprise, considering that activity and insurgent actions had been practically non-existent within this area. It appears that the convoy was completely unprepared for the action and was pretty much caught not in the most advantageous situation. Several soldiers have been wounded and several have been killed at this moment. We have heard that unfortunately 3 U.S. soldiers, well actually 3 coalition service members are dead at the moment, including 2 U.S. soldiers and a translator. We're also hearing that soon there may be an announcement of a 3rd U.S. soldier that was wounded that has succumbed to his wounds. After the ambush was conducted, the President of the United States then announced out of Washington, D.C. that the United States of America will be conducting reciprocal actions against against the ISIS cells and conducting retaliatory strikes for the death of the service members that had died in the ambush within the city of Palmyra. Not long afterwards, a large amount of video evidence started to show that show-of-force flights were being conducted at low altitude and high speeds by U.S. Air Force aircraft within the area to generally start striking fear within some of the ISIS cells that had popped up within the area, and to try and put them in enough fear that they would simply just go back underground and not pose any sort of significant resistance to the U.S. relief columns, or generally the retaliatory attacks that were going to be coming later in the day in the area.
Allahu Akbar.
That's always impressive. Also, by the way, how does the U.S. know for a fact that it was ISIS that carried out the attack? Because obviously that would be the logical perpetrator of the attack. But at first there was a report that came out claiming that a rogue Syrian security forces individual might have carried it out. But it seems like the U.S. knew basically instantly, or at least assumed instantly, that it was ISIS. So is there any type of evidence that they have to prove that it is ISIS that did it?
Generally, in this area, the only existent terrorist force, especially around Palmyra, generally is ISIS. Out of all of the terrorist cells that exist around that surrounding area of Palmyra and the smaller villages nearby, it is practically an ISIS stronghold still to this day. So according to U.S. intelligence, and also due to the fact that the attack happened directly inside of Palmyra, it has been understood that it was an ISIS-based attack, considering that the large majority, well over 90%, of any of the insurgents within the area are affiliated with ISIS.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too, because first of all, it's a tragedy. I wanted to say that to begin with. Condolences to the families of the soldiers, by the way. But it seems like the intelligence was caught off guard here, because usually this would not be able to occur unless there was maybe a gap in the intelligence or something like that. So that makes me a little bit shaky about how they came to this quick conclusion that it was ISIS. Me personally, I would tend to believe it would be ISIS, but we haven't heard any concrete evidence yet that proves that they know exactly who the perpetrator was behind it, outside of simply saying it was generally the group ISIS. So I've heard some people speculating that maybe it was some type of Syrian force officer that did it. The Syrians are denying that, by the way. There was a credible report out there earlier today saying that it was a rogue Syrian officer that did it. And then they came out and said that that's actually not the case. So kind of a little bit murky right now. I'm a little bit on the fence right now about who actually did this.
I generally would most likely be ISIS. The chances are incredibly high, and even Syrian interim government intelligence officials could have had strong affiliations with ISIS, and while they did work for the Syrian interim government, they could also be working doubly for ISIS as well within the area. We do understand, folks, that the Syrian interim government, which generally considers its political base to be that of the Tahrir al-Sham, also called the HTS, is an al-Qaeda splinter cell that developed out of the fracturing of al-Qaeda, generally before Osama bin Laden even died, within the northern area of Syria. After the Arab Spring occurred and the Syrian civil war began, this group completely separated itself generally from al-Qaeda, but continued on with a far more radical approach to the sort of extremist ideals that al-Qaeda had as their own group within the area. All the information that we ever got out of the HTS's controlled regions around the city of Idlib were not incredibly good throughout most of the war, and at one time, the now president of Syria, al-Jilani, actually had a $25 million bounty on his head by the Federal Bureau of Investigation for any information that would lead to his arrest due to the dubious, questionable, and downright criminal actions of the HTS during that time. Considering that that's what most of the bureaucratic bulk of the SIG is made up of at the moment, it's not out of the question to say that one of those members would easily hop over from an extreme splinter cell of al-Qaeda and directly into ISIS. The Syrian interim government, however, has officially stated that there was no involvement whatsoever from anyone who is currently involved in the Syrian Ministry of the Interior or the internal security apparatus, or has ever been involved in the details or workings of the interior security apparatus. So according to the SIG's claims, nobody who has ever worked under their control of the government within Syria was involved in this attack today. But we do have to understand, folks, not to put a lot of grains of salt on what they're saying, but at the same time, we do have to consider that the current existing government within Syria generally evolved out of an Al-Qaeda splinter cell, and also on top of that, I don't really know how they would gather the information of the names of the people who were involved in this ambush that quickly to be able to understand whether or not one of their people was involved. Palmyra is literally in the middle of nowhere. It's practically Dodge City in Syria. It's not like it's easy to get out there, and it's not like it's easy to have a significant security apparatus set up out there to know the names, faces, and ages of the people who were involved in this attack to know whether they were affiliated with the Syrian interim government or not. So at this moment, it's a bit of a question who the exact individuals by name were involved in the attack, but it does appear that U.S. intelligence is heavily leaning into the fact that it appears that it was an ISIS cell, without a doubt, that conducted the attack on the U.S. forces within the area. After the show of force flights were conducted during the daylight hours, we then started to see that more U.S. military activity was being reported within the area towards the nighttime hours. We can also hear that in this clip right here. Now we can actually see it appears to be an A-10 Warthog actually firing off flares as it flies over the city. We actually have some separate angles of this as well.
I guess they must not be expecting any type of ground air defense to actually like target that aircraft, apparently, because obviously the A-10's not good at evading that very well, so it's not very fast, but it is nonetheless a pretty potent aircraft. It's had a very storied history in the Middle East, to say the least.
I'd have to say it certainly has a storied history within the Middle East, but considering that this area has unquestionable air superiority by the United States and generally everyone for that matter, there is no concern of ground fire, so this is one of the few areas that we actually see the A-10 operational, although it still operates generally under the cover of night in every sortie that's used, well, an A-10 is used inside of Syria or Iraq during the modern day. Meanwhile, heading towards the city of Palmyra itself, we were able to see that U.S. forces began to arrive in mass during the nighttime hours to prepare for the actions against the ISIS cells that remain within the city. And we can see that they're stopping right in front of the cameraman, so we actually don't know who the cameraman is, and we also don't know why they were stopping within that area specifically. Additionally, we also were able to see more of the U.S. operations being conducted in Palmyra. I also want to keep in mind for folks that we were not showing anything that violates operational security. This was all filmed around the time of dusk inside of Syria, which was about several hours ago. To be entirely honest with y'all, that was about 7 hours ago. So at this point, this has no operational security issues involved with it. And also on top of that, it does appear that these videos have been emerging on the internet generally due to the benevolence of the United States wanting to generally allow people to see the show of force that the United States will leverage against terrorist forces that conduct attacks against the United States. So here's another clip of the U.S. actions that were being conducted in Palmyra after the attack on the U.S. forces within the city. We can see the convoy moving in, generally made up of MATVs, Max Pros, and also MRAP Cougars generally. These are commonly used inside of Syria by most forces there, as most forces that the United States has deployed inside of Syria in the limited numbers there, they generally are more so along the lines of a motorized brigade, at least in terms of their equipment, considering that no Syrian faction has any significant amount of firepower. These units are far more accustomed to the region. They are very maneuverable, very quick, easy to react to a developing situation, and do not require a significant amount of logistics to be able to support or continue their operations within the area.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We have very, very few forces still left in Syria, or at least that's the reports that we have. So not many U.S. troops there to respond to much, but it looks like, nonetheless, they were still able to call in a ton of air support, and they still have limited ground forces to respond to it. So I don't know if we have an exact number of what is exactly left on the ground from the United States Army or the military, but do we know generally what the number looks like?
At the moment, we're hearing that it's about 5,000 to 4,000 men that are left inside of Syria, both within the Syrian Democratic Forces area of control and also out of the At-Tanf garrison. So it's about a brigade and a third of manpower that we have within the entire country.
And what was the purpose? Because I remember the whole debacle with that whole thing. The United States pulled out pretty much all the remaining troops that we have there, except for the ones you just mentioned. And the ones that are left behind, I think the official reason they were left behind is to patrol with the Syrian forces to ensure that ISIS can't reconstitute. I think that was the official word out of the government. So was that the reason? Because that's still a pretty good bit of troops left behind.
It's not actually an incredibly large amount, only 4,000 men. It's quite an incredibly small amount, folks, because this was actually the amount, well, actually, this is less than the amount of manpower that we had left in Afghanistan when the Afghan government was collapsing and we saw the Kabul crisis occur at the airports. There was actually about that many soldiers left inside of Afghanistan during that time, and that devolved into absolute chaos. So as far as the number of troops present within the country, it's actually a very small amount, and usually these forces are seen in even smaller numbers in the field at small outposts that usually only have several hundred Americans in them at a time, usually somewhere around 2 to 3 companies worth of manpower within a single garrison. The Ataf garrison is the largest in the country and generally houses something about an entire several battalions worth of manpower within it, along with some Syrian forces like the Syrian Free Army, which are also based at the Ataf garrison as well. But still, at the same time, these forces were left inside the country, although their numbers have been diminishing over the prior year, to be able to conduct counterinsurgency operations against any terrorist forces that may arise within the region, and to also ensure that there is a general lapse or generally a stoppage of the fighting that's existed within the area between the multiple different factions. So basically, the U.S. forces there are still there to attempt to maintain order while the Syrian interim government starts to take control, and to also generally dissuade the Syrian interim government from conducting any full-on offensives or attacks against the Syrian Democratic Forces, which we still have a small number of U.S. Soldiers that were within SDF-controlled territory at this time today.
Also, by the way, just a real quick correction because I pulled this up to ensure that this number was accurate. According to the current Defense Department figures we have, it looks like the U.S. maintains only 1,000 troops in Syria at the moment,
really?
and that's down. Yeah, it's only 1,000 now, and that declined from 2,000 in late 2024. So there's less than about 1,000 troops in Syria. And now, granted, there are about 2,500 more U.S. forces stationed in neighboring Iraq, but they're not inside of Syria. So all these forces appear to be generally housed inside of eastern Syria for the most part. And the official reason was to counter ISIS. That was the official narrative that was put out by the U.S. government. So we practically have nothing left behind in Syria, like 1,000 troops. That's obviously 4 times less than the 4,000 number we were just running with. So we have barely anything. So that's actually a good bit of our forces you see in that video right there moving around. That's a very big chunk of it right there on the video.
I was remembering that number from earlier in the year, and I remember that was when it was getting cut down from, I think it was 5,500, then they cut it down to 4 or 3, and that was kind of the running number. But apparently, folks, somewhere in the midst of everything else that's been going on, they've actually pulled out pretty much everyone else that's in Syria, and now they're only left with about, for the United States contingent in Syria, about a battalion's worth of manpower. A battalion is usually about 800 to 1,000 men, so we have a single motorized battalion in the entirety of Syria, and I would assume with that kind of a number, most if not all of them are going to be based out of the Ataf garrison only, considering that the Ataf garrison was made to accommodate an even larger number of troops than what we currently have in the country at the moment. So quite a small number, an incredibly small number. As a matter of fact, you can hardly really do anything with 1,000 troops. As a matter of fact, you couldn't have even done anything with several thousand troops in Afghanistan, much less 1,000 in Syria. But moving on from that, we were able to see an additional clip of the A-10 Warthog that did fly over the city of Palmyra overnight. And we can see that right here as it flies directly overhead, apparently popping chaff and flares, because you can actually see right here that it appears to maybe pop some chaff. You can see some glitter, or what appears to be something along the lines of glitter within the air, which is incredibly similar to the profile or visual sight of chaff. But that's the end of that clip, and generally showing us the continued air operations over the area. Of course, it is an incredibly unfortunate situation. It does appear that the United States is trying to leverage all of the available manpower that we've left inside of Syria to try and deal with the situation. But I do have to say that it is incredibly unfortunate to hear that 2 U.S. service members and one of our liaisons within the country, which was a translator, have unfortunately died in the ambush and the attack. And it's always an incredibly disheartening and sad thing to hear that soldiers of our own nation have died in over across the seas and foreign lands, protecting our nation's interests nonetheless, but still incredibly sad to hear of their passing. Nevertheless, a lot of people are talking at the moment about if ISIS was involved or not, and a lot of people seem to be putting in their own opinions and ideas and statements about who may have been involved and responsible for the attack that was conducted in Palmyra today. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So the big question right now is who do you think this really was? Because there's reports out there that the US is putting out saying that it was ISIS that carried it out. And then there were some other reports claiming that it was a rogue Syrian soldier that carried this out and somehow he was an extremist and he went berserk and then tried to take out US soldiers. So what do you think is the case? 51% said it was likely ISIS forces involved in this, while 23% said it's simply too murky to know right now, and 17% said it was likely a rogue Syrian soldier. So I'll be honest with y'all. The prime suspect would be ISIS. That is the main reason that U.S. forces were left behind inside of Syria in the first place, was to deal with ISIS. So naturally, if there's going to be a group that wants to target those U.S. forces, it is probably going to be that group. So they're the likely culprit. But at the same time, though, it's kind of like making an assumption that it was ISIS a fighter that did it, because so far we've not seen any concrete proof that it was indeed an ISIS soldier that carried this out right now. But I would tend to lean toward that idea. I'm actually going to be with the 51%. I think it likely was ISIS, but once again, the proof seems to be a little bit fleeting at the moment. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that it is highly likely ISIS, considering that ISIS did attempt to take control of the city in the midst of the collapse of the Assad regime. It is showing that their most significant basing is within the city of Palmyra at the moment. That would also lead us to believe that if an attack was ever conducted against U.S. forces in that area, it would highly likely be ISIS. Now, as far as a lot of people talking about whether or not someone from the Syrian interim government was involved, there was a lot of things that people have to consider, and I saw some people saying this in the chat. Well, it was really one or two people, and I would have to say that this is a fairly dense sort of a thinking from some people who've been saying this. Some people have been saying that it could never have been a former SIG involved intelligence officer or official that was involved in the attack today, because the HTS never liked ISIS during the Syrian civil war and actually fought against them. And that's a very, very shallow and two-dimensional sort of an understanding. These groups hated each other because ISIS was attempting to destroy the HTS when they existed, because ISIS was going to be the sole leader of the Islamic world, at least in their minds, and no other faction could stand to exist within the area, even if it was another radical Islamic terrorist group. That's the only reason why they hated each other and went to war. Beyond that, they have some fairly similar ideological perspectives on what should be pushed forward within the region. And we have to understand that if someone was involved in al-Jilani's government and is watching it somewhat mellow out, although they're still conducting genocides against everyone that's not a Sunni Arab, it's still mellowing out to the general extent of what they were in the Syrian civil war for most of the duration of it. They probably have become disheartened and could have ended up becoming a member of ISIS. It's not like you have to go online to go fill out a job application to join ISIS. Literally anybody can join ISIS. Anyone can create a splinter cell, and that makes it somewhat likely that someone who may or may not have been involved in the Syrian interim government or in the HTS may consider ISIS to be their next ideological step, considering that the SIG, or generally what exists of the HTS now, is starting to mellow out a lot of its approaches to become a lot more marketable to the outside world, because radical Islam doesn't really sell all too well to practically every single country on the planet. So there is a likelihood that one of them could have been involved, but the problem is, folks, is that is all conjecture at this point. I would say that it's pretty much guaranteed that ISIS was involved in the attack. The statistical chance of that is incredibly high considering the region. But at the same time, we also have to say we have no clue how many ISIS fighters were involved, what they were armed with. Apparently they were armed with something strong enough to be able to catch the convoy off guard and also cause enough damage to the vehicles that the U.S. forces were in, or enough of a surprise that they were able to kill at least two U.S. service members and a translator, apparently outright almost, in the midst of this attack. And on top of that, we do not know the names of the people who were involved either to get any further information on them. And on top of that, even if we know their names, it's going to be hard to get information on them. They're all Syrians. And that's to say, they've been embroiled in a civil war, and most of these regions have never even been controlled by a single faction or multiple factions over just the last 11 or 12 years. There is no consistent records keeping of these people. Any crimes that they've conducted, whether they're felons, whether they've been in prison, there's literally no records on a lot of these people. Records are just coming around to existing again in Syria. So we might even get to know the names of these people, or we might see them laying dead on the side of a street here in the future after a U.S. Reprisal attack, and we still really won't know who these people are, rather than they're most likely affiliated with ISIS. So I would have to say high chance that it's ISIS, but as far as to the individuals that were involved in the attack, it's hard to say what they did as prior occupations before this attack, or whether they were involved in the Syrian interim government or not. But I'm not saying it's out of the question.
I would have to say though, it seems unlikely. I've seen a couple people say this, and I will be fair. It is a fair question to ask. Some people are saying maybe Jelani and his government was involved in this somehow, and maybe it's his like way to get revenge for everything in the past that the U.S. might have done to Syria. I would highly doubt that because Jelani and all of his guys in the government right now, they stand to get really, really rich by working with the West. They are once again having sanctions removed off of Syria. They are starting to have trade again. They're discussing all kinds of economic benefits with the West. And also they're putting on a really good diplomatic show, even though they are, obviously they have a sketchy past to say the least. They're putting on a good diplomatic show pretending, or at least I guess genuinely acting like they want to have good relations with the West. So for them to covertly like do something like give intel to ISIS to go do this, I don't think they would risk that because it would risk the entire economic benefits they're getting with the West. I'm not sure if they'd want to do that. It wouldn't make much sense.
It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but then again, at the same time, you do have to consider that individuals are individuals, and regardless whether they understand the risks or not, some people might be driven enough by their radical ideology to assist or even get involved in an ISIS attack against U.S. forces. It's not out of the question, and especially considering that we've seen that the Syrian interim government has conducted, and I can't even show you all the videos of this to prove this, but I can tell y'all, they have conducted genocides against the Alawite Arabs of the coastline in Latakia and Tartus, and they've also done the same to the Druze in the Asawida government. So it's not out of the question to say that these people are still prone to absolutely barbaric and terroristic tendencies when dealing with people that have some form of a cultural difference or aren't a part of their majority bulk population center that they pull their government authority from. So it's not out of the question to say that they could look at the Americans still, or someone in the government inside of Syria could look at the Americans as what every radical Islamic group looks at us as, which is the infidel for some reason, although we don't profess any particular religion in the United States as a government, and they could have probably tried to assist an attack, whether or not they'll turn out well for everyone in Syria.
Yeah, it could be as well. And also, kind of like the same thing, kind of like going into what you're saying there, the same thing we're seeing in Gaza. Like, for example, no matter how hard Israel tries to negotiate with the group there, I believe it's Hezbollah inside of Gaza, they try to negotiate with Hezbollah and try to say, okay, we'll come to this agreement, and then they'll agree on something. But of course, the way it works in terror groups is they're not really very well consolidated or organized. It's kind of like a loose association. So there's different factions within that group that may not agree with the primary or the majority of the Hezbollah group, and they might decide to attack anyway, even against the agreement that they came to. So honestly, folks, I still view the Syrian government as a light version of a terror regime, to be perfectly honest with you. They have the past to back that up, by the way, because the guy literally had a bounty on his head from the United States that's currently in charge of Syria, and now he's put on a suit, and now he's a government, and he's a businessman now. So you always got to keep that in mind when you work with Syria, not to be too trusting. Give them the benefit of the doubt because we want to try to have influence over Syria, but you don't want to go too far, though, to give them too much benefit of the doubt because, they've got a bad past. You got to keep that in mind.
Also, really quickly, I saw someone say this, and I'm not trying to discredit military intelligence here, but someone said the military has so much more info than you guys. Well, if they do, why in the world did they not stop this ambush today before it happened? If they had the endless amount of reconnaissance data and intelligence that you claim they have, they probably would have been able to see this attack coming up before it happened and stop these soldiers from getting killed. Right now, considering that this just happened and U.S. soldiers were killed, the military is probably scrambling to gather information, but if they just had an entire spreadsheet and file on this before it happened, then it makes no sense why in the world they would have allowed a convoy to literally walk straight into an ambush in the middle of the city, considering that any commander involved in that situation would say, we're not sending them into Palmyra. They're going to go around the city, or we're going to stay on the perimeter and allow them to attack us on the outside the city, where we have the element of maneuverability, and we also have distance and range to be able to call in further support and assistance and fix them in place. So I would say the military certainly does have a lot more to work off of, but at the same time, it's not like they're the all-seeing eye, because if they were, this attack wouldn't have happened today. But moving on from that, we also were able to hear that a refinery did explode near to the area of Deir ez-Zor, apparently a smaller one within the area. We do not know why it exploded or if this is involved at all in the situation that happened at Palmyra, but there was a significant fire that did occur within the area.
Is that a fuel truck sitting right there?
Yeah, it is.
What the hell? Like, wouldn't it be like prudent to drive away, like to get the hell out of there?
Yeah, you would think, but sometimes workplace safety isn't really a priority in Syria, to much to the dismay of many, including us here on the channel. But still, a very interesting occurrence nonetheless. We also, speaking of more news within the Middle East before we move on out of this area, we are going to be moving on into southern Lebanon, as we have heard that the Israelis have apparently given a notice to evacuate out of the village of Yana within the southern Lebanon area. This is south of the Litani River, and it appears that they are going to be targeting and striking Hezbollah infrastructure, ammunition dumps, and other facilities within the area of this village. It appears that Israel has deemed it to be a Hezbollah stronghold and will be conducting airstrikes on it here soon. We've also heard an announcement, at least according to the IDF, that they have killed Ra'ad Saad, the head of the production headquarters of Hamas, who is the second in charge in Hamas at the moment. This airstrike was conducted on a car within the Gaza Strip today, and does appear to be a violation of the ceasefire. While this is a very good thing to hear, hearing a terrorist got obliterated, funnily enough, it actually does appear that this may have been a violation of the existing ceasefire. Due to the current accords in the ceasefires, or I believe it's called the Abraham Accords, which Hamas and the Israelis agreed to, neither one is supposed to be conducting strikes on the other. The Israelis have conducted strikes on clear Hamas combatants that were armed, but we don't really know if this guy was armed or not. And also, interestingly enough, the Israelis made it incredibly clear today that they did not notify the U.S. administration in advance about this upcoming strike, and much like the strikes that they had tried to conduct on Qatar against Hamas officials there, they did this without notifying the United States, and then said later, oh, we didn't tell them and we really don't care. So, it does appear that the ceasefire is not going to last that long. Not getting into who in the world's even responsible or at fault here, or complaining about everyone breaking the ceasefire, it does appear that the ceasefire is going to be doomed to fail. Hamas is clearly not disarming itself, which is in violation of the ceasefire, and the Israelis are clearly bombing Hamas officials, which they weren't supposed to do according to the ceasefire. So basically, the ceasefire is only existing on paper at this point, and there is going to be an upcoming conflict once again between the Hamas forces in the Gaza Strip and the IDF, which still holds some parts of the Gaza Strip at the yellow line at this moment. So that is also the current situation while everything went on in Syria today, with the Israelis inside the Gaza Strip and also within southern Lebanon. I would generally have to say, folks, though, here's my thing. I don't know why in the world we ever had the Israelis negotiate a ceasefire with a terrorist group. It is a terrorist group. We don't negotiate with terrorists. That's been the old saying that's existed in the United States since our inception. That's nothing even new. Many of y'all might not even know this. This is an interesting fact, that the United States Navy only exists because we had to go and destroy terrorists back in the late 1790s. The only reason we brought the U.S. Navy into existence was because these group of barber pirates, also called corsairs, from North Africa kept seizing U.S. ships and taking the crew prisoner and selling them into slavery, and also using the ships as their own, or selling those ships off to other countries like the Ottomans. Because of that, the United States raised the money to found a navy, and we went over there to the barber states while everyone else was paying them ransom so that they wouldn't attack their ships. We went in there and we just started wiping out corsairs all over the place. And we succeeded. The United States single-handedly dismantled the Barbary states on the Barbary coast in the very early 1800s, successfully, because even back then we did not negotiate with terrorists. I don't know why we had the Israelis, and we also got involved in negotiating with a terrorist group, because it should have been clear from the start that terrorist groups are never going to hold up to their word, considering that their entire existence is being a band of cutthroats that conducts heinous crimes against humanity and war crimes at that.
Well, they also loosened up the negotiating with a terrorist thing, also with Syria, because until recently, the group that Jelani was associated with, the HTS, was classified as a terrorist group here in the United States. They just only recently got removed from it. So, I mean, the U.S. has completely changed their foreign policy approach with that. It used to be, we will never negotiate with terrorists. Now it's they'll do it if it serves a political interest. They'll do it. But honestly, though, it's very unwise. It's just, in my opinion, I believe it's very very unwise to do that because you can't trust these groups. Also, even if you decide to trust the group, like I was mentioning earlier, they're not strongly consolidated and organized. So the other factions don't like that are truly really radical and do not want to agree to any type of peace. They're going to attack and break it anyway. So there's really no hope in hell. That's why the policy was in place not to negotiate with terrorists, because literally you can't really get an agreement to stick in the first place.
I would completely agree with that. I don't know why in the world we would negotiate with a terrorist group. I don't know why we're negotiating and treating terrorists with an even hand these days, considering that terrorists should never really be followed on their word. It's like trusting a pirate. Why in the world would anyone ever trust a pirate? Why in the world would anyone ever trust a terrorist? It's the same question, just different words. I don't know why in the world that's going on. And also I see some people saying that this is only the current administration, and you would be sorely mistaken. The prior administration was the one who actually brought Jelani off of the terrorist list, along with the HTS and others. And the current administration is continuing on with that approach. I thought we said it was a bad approach back then. We're also saying it's a bad approach now. I said, let's give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit. And then within 2 weeks after saying that, they started conducting massacres on the Syrian coast against the Alawite Arabs. Then they clearly were a terrorist group. There was no redemption there. So then we said, well, that's quite questionable. They clearly are a terrorist group that's taken over the country. We probably should treat them as such. And then the last administration took them off of every terrorist registry. And now the current one is not only leaving that alone, they're actually improving our relations with a former terrorist group and a former leader of the terrorist group. This is literally, like, this guy literally, folks, as far as al-Jilani exists, he is the Al-Qaeda, he is the Osama bin Laden of the HTS, like Osama bin Laden was to Al-Qaeda. He's the leader of a terrorist group. He was the leader of a terrorist group. Now they're called the Syrian Interim Government. But it's still the same thing, and that's a highly questionable sort of a position to put the United States in, is to back up a government that has an origin in a terrorist group. It's not a good thing in my opinion, and it's also showing that in Israel this doesn't really bode all too well in the big picture and over any short period of time. But we'll wait and see what comes out of it. But I have to say, folks, at this point, I think this is a bit of a blunder in foreign policy to continue to allow terrorist groups to be treated even-handedly by the U.S. government, whether they won the Syrian civil war or not. But moving on,
yeah, I would say so, definitely.
Yeah, I would say, oh heavens. But moving on from that and out of the Middle East, it is time for us, folks, to move on down and on into, I actually got to try and figure out what we're going to cover next, folks, because there's a lot to cover. The war in Syria, Thailand and Cambodia is still going strong. We also understand there's a major counteroffensive now going on in Ukraine, and also there was huge attacks on Russia, and also a little bit of a news with Captain Craig Sparrow. But we are actually going to be moving on, before we get to Thailand and Cambodia, on into Ukraine and Russia. We're not going to cover everything here. We're just going to cover the important bits of news and information, and then we'll circle back to the rest of it later. But we have been able to hear of absolutely significant counteroffensive actions that have been conducted by the armed forces of Ukraine over the course of the day. And believe it or not, folks, it's right where Zelensky left. Zelensky just left yesterday the city of Kupyansk. Kupyansk is a city within the northern part of the country along the Oskil River. It's actually two cities. On the western side of the Oskil River is the city of Kupyansk. On the eastern side of the river is the city of Kupyansk-Veslovy. Both of these cities generally are the same, but they're technically two separate ones. Right now, the Ukrainians do control Kupyansk-Veslovy, but they are fighting a very contentious battle for the city of Kupyansk itself. And let me go get you all the deep state UA map for our most accurate front line that we can get at the moment. So let me go and show this to all of y'all of what we've got. So, let me get it to the day before. Ah, here we are, right here. So this was the situation in Kupyansk when Zelensky arrived yesterday. This was on the 12th of December. Zelensky stood right here at this spot on the road, which is only about 500 meters away from the front line where the Russians were at, and he spoke to multiple battalions and brigade commands within the area. He also issued out awards to the soldiers of Ukraine who had showed great valor and courage on the battlefield against the Russians, and also spoke of the situation within the area. Zelensky then departed the area after the award ceremony and getting attuned to the frontline situation from the actual commanders on the field. Not long after that, the Ukrainian armed forces conducted a counteroffensive, pretty much right after he left. So apparently Zelensky went down there and he said, "I have to say y'all are doing well." And then he dropped a couple of coins in their hand. He said, "Remember, no Russian, And then he got back in the car, and then they drove off. Because this is what Kupyansk looks like today.
Oh, wow. Look at that. I guess they got motivated. That morale boost was real.
The morale boost was real. He showed up, and he was like, boys, you're going to retake the whole damn city in a day. And they were like, yeah, man, they did it. They, crazily enough, did it, folks. So to tell y'all what's been going on in this counteroffensive, the Russians had actually pushed directly into the city and were fighting for the central area of the city when Zelensky visited yesterday. So what the Ukrainians did, from what we know over the course of the day, none of this is OPSEC related because it's all come and gone now, but the Ukrainians conducted an attack on the weak point. Right here, this little narrow point on what appears to be a hand. It's like a hand throwing up the rock symbol with a thumb out right here, basically. But at the wrist of that hand, the Ukrainians conducted a spearhead attack directly across and literally severed the entire Russian line right then and there. After that, the Russians that were in the city were literally encircled and entrapped at that point, quite literally besieged. So they panicked. And from what we know, most of them that were around the area of Holubivka and Rudkivka actually conducted a breakthrough, taking significant losses in the process, and have been able to reunite with the Russian forces of the 27th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade and the 122nd Motorized Rifle Regiment that still are holding positions around the area of Liman-Pershi. There are apparently some Russian forces, we are not really sure how large they are, that are stuck in small enclaves within the city of Kupyansk at the moment, but effectively at this moment today, the city of Kupyansk has been liberated, not only including the center of the city where the heavy fighting was ongoing, but around the entirety of the city and its surrounding suburbs. They have been completely liberated by the armed forces of Ukraine today. This is, crazily enough, folks, one of the largest offensives that has happened this year by either side, at least in the amount of ground that was taken within a 24-hour period, or really less than that. The Ukrainians were able to take a whopping, I think it was something around 50 square kilometers. It says 40 here, but I think it was somewhere around 60 in reality. Square kilometers of ground in less than 24 hours. In modern warfare terms, in Ukraine, that's literally unheard of, and that is considered to be a major victory and a major breakthrough at this point, and it has saved the city of Kupyansk and given it a second wind to serve as a major defensive bastion once again when the Russian Federation attempts to march on the city once more. So the Russians went, folks, from claiming that they controlled the city of Kupyansk to having Zelensky show up in Kupyansk, proving them wrong, and then they completely lost everything in Kupyansk, all within about 3 days. So that is probably the quickest turnaround I've ever seen. That's like a before and after weight loss ad.
Yeah, I guess you could say the 3-day war for Kupyansk was a huge success for Ukraine. Not so much that 3-day war situation never works out for Russia, but it worked out for Zelensky.
Man, Zelensky sat there and went down there yesterday. He said, "All right, fellas, we have to show the world that we still need military support. So beat their ass." And then he just said, "All right, I'm going off to go ask some more people to give us some bombs. I'll see y'all around when you win." And then they freaking won. Like, honestly, this is unbelievable, folks. Because if you look right now at Pokrovsk, this is what the Russians were able to do over that same period of time. That's it. Right there. That was
That's
it.
barely anything.
Yeah, the Ukrainians are still fighting for Pokrovsk at the moment. They still control the northern part of the city right here. And they also still control a decent amount of Myrnohrad that's still left as well. So it's a little bit crazy, folks, to see that the Russians took that amount of ground in Pokrovsk, and the Ukrainians, in the meantime, retook an entire major city in the Kharkiv flank, which is unreal. But we are going to get y'all into the video and picture evidence that we got out of the front line, which was absolutely sublime. We very rarely ever get to see battlefield footage like this, especially in the present day. But we got a lot of it out of Kupyansk from multiple different units that were involved in the counterattack over the course of the day. We were able to see our first clip here showing us the work of the 425th Skala Regiment that had actually been relocated, folks, from the city of Pokrovsk on up here. So this is quite an interesting development. This is actually showing that they took their finest assault regiments and moved them up here for this attack, which is also a fairly important thing to note as well. They put a lot of planning and effort into this and relocated these forces quickly to put them in position to successfully conduct this counterattack in a very limited time frame. We're going to mute that. I don't know if that's copyrighted or not. But we can see here them showing the city of Kupyansk and also the dominant heights within the center of the city here where you can see these Brezhnevkas currently sitting.
It's just a shame that even though it's still a very, very big a strategic victory, also a propaganda victory too, to be able to show the West that they are making progress. But it's still a damn shame to see that the place has been just devastated, like it's ruined. But nonetheless, though, it's war. It happens. So, at least they took it back.
And it is very impressive to see that they did end up retaking this. And not only that, apparently it caused some significant losses for the Russians at the same time. We can actually see them talking here about the position that the Russians held, how it affected the front, and we can also see the forces of the 425th involved in the counteroffensive today here in this footage. They just scurrying around. They're scurrying around and winning an entire city back.
They went from Commie Block 20 to 21. They upgraded.
Man. East side, block 20. Man, like it's man. Zelensky's sitting there and he's like, Kreviri, I grew up in block 103, and now in Kupyansk we're going to blow up block 3. Like, man, like, call up the ops, get the 425th on this business.
Man, poor old Kupyansk. It's all their blocks have been blasted. This poor city right here has been through the ringer.
Oh yeah, but still, it does show the Ukrainians are defending it quite heavily, as a city that is scarred by a war significantly has become a battlefield for an incredibly long period of time, like Vovchansk. And while Vovchansk has been completely destroyed, one thing that has not been destroyed is the Ukrainian fighting spirit to continue to struggle to defend their nation against the Russians. And this city also shows the very same marks as well. And moving on from that clip from the 425th, we also got some other footage of the Ukrainians finding some Russians. These were found by the 429th Achilles, and they found out something quite interesting. Here, the pipe. The pipe. The Russians were using a pipe again.
Oh no, not the pipe. Is it the one that has like the actual like oil fumes and like petroleum fumes in it, or is it actually a clean one this time?
I think the one with the, I think all of them have fumes in them. I think this is one of them. But oh look, there they are, coming out the pipe, like Super Mario.
Look at them. They're probably intoxicated from that. That's why they're bouncing around. Look at them.
Man, they've gotten high on the sauce in there, I'm telling you. But the Ukrainians are about to
close. Not quite as good as vodka, but it works for them.
And now the Ukrainians are closing the pipe.
Also, by the way, I find it very, very funny that the U.S. literally just got saying that Zelensky can fight his heart out if he wants to, but he doesn't hold the cards. It's like, well, apparently he just gained the extra card here when he took Kupyansk. It looks like to me like they're making progress. Isn't it funny, by the way, that while Putin's trying to pull this whole diplomatic game he's doing here, this whole charade, trying to make the West and the United States specifically believe that he's actually gaining ground and Ukraine's losing, just for literally right after those talks start going into the background and fading off, Ukraine starts retaking all that crap that Russia was desperately trying to take for propaganda reasons. That's really very telling.
Oh yeah, because the Russians were going, we're taking Kupyansk and Pokrovsk. Ukraine will never be able to hold us back. We'll do what we want. And then they just completely lost Pokrovsk in one day. Literally a singular day. They lost the whole city and all the progress that they had made over 2 months. 2 months, by the way. It took them 2 months, folks, to make that kind of ground in this city. Like, look at this. Let's see here. I'm all the way back. This is 14 days ago. This is 2 weeks ago. That was the frontline situation 2 weeks ago. They've been in Kupyansk forever, literally. Like, it's been months. And the Russians were going, it's only a matter of time. We've completely taken Kupyansk. It is ours, bleed. Like, look, you can literally see all the flank maneuvers happening. They were still in Kupyansk. This is now, at this point, folks, this is the beginning of November. This is a month and a half ago. So now we're moving further on back than that. I'm trying to see if we can get us exactly to 2 months ago so that way we can prove to y'all how long this has been going on. There we go. About approximately 2 months ago, they took up the positions that they then held all the way up until yesterday when the Ukrainians completely uprooted them and pushed them out of all of them. That tells you how badly the Russians are doing. It takes them 2 months to gain the ground, and it takes them less than 24 hours to lose all of it.
Yeah, it's really honestly crazy. I would like to hear the U.S. officials come out since they're so vocal about the whole Ukraine-Russia situation. They want to, take very illogical sides in the whole thing. I would like to hear U.S. officials come out and say, Putin, I think it looks like you're losing. You might want to make a deal. It's not wise to pick on a country as determined as Ukraine. You might want to wrap it up. I would like to hear a statement like that for a change because we've heard a ton of statements coming out talking about how you don't pick on bigger countries like Russia because they can squash you when they feel like it. And also, Russia has all the cards. Let's see the other side of the coin. Now that Ukraine's retaking pretty big areas here, very strategic victories, it's about time for a statement like that.
I would agree. There should be a statement like that. And we also saw the Hartia conducting a little counteroffensive here as well. Let's take a little look. Oh, they got that Predator music, like from the movie Predator. We see them pointing out the building. They're like, we're going to grease them. And then they go over there to grease them. We see him here in a basement. We see him continuing to point out their plans. We can also see a Russian here taking a nap. We now see them getting involved and actually conducting the counterattack through the city. And from what we understand, they were generally involved in the Hardia Brigade in pushing the Russians into the small enclaves that they're currently trapped in the city right now. So it does appear from what we can understand, this went off without a hitch. Honestly, folks, we haven't seen an offensive like this in about 2 years, I would actually say. We haven't seen this from the Russians or the Ukrainians. This was actually a pretty wild one over the course of today. And we can see here decent amounts of Reese's pieces. We can also see them here checking out the little helmet and continuing to conduct their actions throughout the city. We see one of their drones flying in and finding some Russians within one of the buildings holed up. We can actually geolocate the drone footage, folks. I won't do that because it takes a decent amount of effort to do that, but there is enough landmarks in a lot of these clips that we could actually go into Kupyansk and show exactly where the Russians were in the midst of these attacks, which would have been around the central area of the city. Finally, we have one last little bit out of Kupyansk. Here's a little bit of more footage out of the counteroffensive for Kupyansk today. We're going to have to mute that. They're playing the grocery store music. And we see them moving on along.
Man, I tell you what, they're playing the grocery store music because Ukraine is bringing in all the heat. They're bringing in the ghost pepper. They're bringing in the Reaper pepper.
Man, I guess you could say that they're playing the grocery store music because they're bagging the Russians.
They're bagging them up.
Man, POP, hold it down. There's a prisoner right there, by the way. Oh, look, there he is again without
oh my God, that was like a jump scare. Like, geez, did they have to do it like that? Damn.
Man, I didn't know that the Russians got Sid from Toy Story in the army. I didn't know that they had done that.
Man, this kid right here, he's edgy.
He said, I'm going to put this baby head on this spider body. Like, it's like, okay. Oh, look, a frat dude. Wow, that's rare. Like, usually they're like old men in the Russian army. Like, yo, I was like fighting for Russia and shit, and then they captured me, man. Like, shut the front. And then we got I don't know. I don't know. But he is a prisoner for sure. And then they got this guy.
Oh, he's laughing and chuckling. That's interesting.
Well, you see the Ukrainians tossing some nades in. And also just working hard, They're putting in those hours.
I feel like if Ukraine just gets a couple more victories, like let's say the one they just got in the city that they just retook, if they get a couple more victories like that, and also Zelensky showing up to the front lines here and there, I have a feeling that they're going to start making some more progress after this. Because once momentum gets started with these recapturing of places and like Kupyansk, etc., they really start picking up from what I've seen. So I wouldn't expect anything too crazy, but I think they're going to start retaking ground slowly but surely, which would be a good thing, obviously.
And I would have to say, it would be a great and incredible thing to see. But with that, folks, it is time for us to move on out of the counteroffensive in Ukraine and on into moving out of Russia and Ukraine for a minute, the Thailand-Cambodia situation, because a lot has been developing in Southeast Asia over this. But before we move on into that news, folks, I do have to say that we are going to take a short little breather for a moment, so that way folks can go and get some popcorn, go to the restroom, and get some snacks, and then we'll be going right back to the news after we answer 3 questions from the chat. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night, this one goes to Pianfar, who puts in a $100 support, and thank you very much, good sir, for that massive support once again tonight, and we do appreciate that. And Pianfar said, what will become of the ISIS prisoners that the Kurds have control of if Turkey takes over their territory?
They'll probably be kept in prison by the Turks if that's possible, but if the SDF loses control of those prisons, generally they could escape. So the highly likely chances is that they could end up escaping, unless if there's some sort of a pre-prepared treaty or action made by the Turks with the SDF to have them transferred over to the Turks in advance, so that way they don't end up escaping back into the wild of Syria to conduct whatever they're going to do next in the future. So I hope that does address that question incredibly well, at least the best I can. And I gotta thank you massively, PM4, for the unbelievably humongous support and helping this channel to keep on running. I've got to thank folks like you massively, because you help us to be able to cover the news, whether it's incredibly unfortunate like today or incredibly good like it also is today, in double-edged sort of a way, the unfortunate deaths of the U.S. soldiers in Syria and the amazing news of the wildly successful victory the Ukrainian armed forces just had inside of Kupyansk. And you make it possible for us to be able to do all of those things. And I got to thank you incredibly for that, because it's folks like you who go out of their way to support this channel that help us to be able to cover the news in the most accurate and factual way that we can, getting out all of the details that we possibly could, while other networks and other channels hardly ever do that. So humongous thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address your question well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our second super chat of the night goes to Bobby, also known as LC39A, and he puts in a very generous $100 support as well. And thank you very much, Bobby, as well, for that generosity every single night, almost every single night that is, and we do appreciate that. And Bobby said, "Go Ukraine."
And I would agree. Go Ukraine for sure. This victory today is an unbelievable one. Truly incredible. And I got to say, a humongous thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Bobby. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. We wouldn't be able to talk about the amazing victories that Ukraine had today, all of their exploits inside of their drone and missile attacks that they also conducted, and everything else that's going on around the world, because the world is a busy place today, and it has been a busy place for a while now. And I got to thank you so much for allowing us the ability to sit down here every single day and spend practically most, if not all, of our days working on this channel and making sure to put out as much news as we possibly can, as best researched as possible as well. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
And this one is going to go to Mark Ead, who also puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Mark, for supporting the channel tremendously over the last few days, and we do appreciate that. He said, "Christmas fun, fellows," and chur, LSA from New Zealand.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Marky, and thank you so much for the Christmas fund. Christmas is just around the corner, and hopefully we'll be able to have a great Christmas. I don't know, we'll see, but a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible, and help to continue to make this channel a reality every day, so that we can get on air and say, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again, and with that, folks, it's time for us to move on into the rest of the news from around the world. Moving us on directly into Southeast Asia, we have been able to hear, and I can report to all of y'all, that the statement from the President of the United States yesterday did not stand up to scrutiny at all, either yesterday or today. It appears that there is no existent ceasefire. It doesn't even appear that there's really one that's on the table at the moment. We did see that the Cambodian Prime Minister did make a statement saying that they were looking to get a ceasefire that would be achieved by the evening of today, but that did not happen either. The Thai government has stated in response, and also really quickly, actually I'm going to go to Facebook really quickly, folks. I won't be able to show it on air, but I can read you all the transcript of what Hun Manet put on his Facebook page as an official statement for the nation of Cambodia, which I will read as the following. Let's see here. Here we are. So, here's the statement by Hun Manet. Cambodia welcomes and supports the initiative of His Excellency Prime Minister of Malaysia, His Excellency Anwar Ibrahim, for a ceasefire tonight, monitored by ASEAN Observer Group and joined by the United States. Cambodia welcomes and supports the initiative of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim of Malaysia for a ceasefire tonight, which will be monitored by ASEAN Observation Team with participation of the United States. For some reason, Hun Manet always puts out the statement and twice, like it's just copy and pasted right below it. But that is the statement that the Prime Minister of Cambodia made, and we also understand that this was the statement by Anwar Ibrahim of Malaysia as well, who is the intermediary, at least in theory, between Thailand and Cambodia at this point due to the Malaysia Accords, which were supposed to be the effective peace treaty that ended the conflict. Follow up to my discussion with the President of the United States and taking into account the ongoing tensions of the Cambodia-Thailand border, I've held separate phone conversations with the Thai Prime Minister and the Cambodian Prime Minister. In the discussion, I voiced Malaysia's serious concerns and urged both sides to stop all forms of hostility and not to take any further military actions, including the use of violence or mobilization of armed forces to the front line, effective at 10 p.m. the 13th of December of 2025. That is not a ceasefire, mind you. That is just an advisement that he would love to see that there was a ceasefire, but there was no actual ceasefire agreed to. To support efforts to ease tensions and improve transparency, Malaysia has requested the assignment of ASEAN observer teams led by the commander of the Malaysian Armed Forces to monitor the situation in the field. The mission will also be supported by satellite monitoring provided by the U.S. government starting at the same time. Still, no effective ceasefire either from the Cambodian government statements from Hun Manet or from Anwar Ibrahim, who is currently the leader of Malaysia. In the meantime, we did get to hear another statement from Anutin Charnavarakul, who has made it incredibly clear they're not going to be working through the normal diplomatic channels. According to his statement today, made in an interview, he stated that if Cambodia wants a ceasefire, it must ask Thailand directly, not run to other countries' leaders to negotiate. Thailand has been invaded and threatened. We have taken appropriate measures to protect our sovereignty and our people. We should not have outsiders telling us about this. Suddenly someone comes and says there should be a ceasefire at 10 tonight. Simply put, that's impossible. So it's made it incredibly...
Honestly though, good on Thailand for saying that. I'll be honest with you, I actually support what Thailand's saying with that, because it's one thing to, negotiate a ceasefire in good faith, like for the right reasons, like because you actually want peace to take place. It's a whole nother reason to jump in and unfairly start saying, get a ceasefire done. I don't give a damn what the details are. I just want a ceasefire so I can say I got one. I mean, that's irritating. I mean, even as an outside observer, that's irritating to hear that. So, I mean, Thailand isn't putting up with it. Like, they're not worried at all. And also, by the way, the U.S. holds economic leverage over Thailand. So they are taking a risk by saying that, but they aren't playing games. They're simply saying, get the hell out of our business, and that's the end of it.
Man, Zelensky, I will say this, man. Zelensky's like, listen, let us try and reason. Meanwhile, Anutin Charnavarakul, kiss my ass, man. Like, bro, he just comes out like...
I'll tell you, he's not playing around. Like, you got to admit, that is ballsy. I understand why he's saying it, but I mean, that's pretty ballsy.
Yeah, that's pretty ballsy. But once again, I just want to say this, folks, because I have a moral compass, folks. I don't like when people lie. I don't know if it was an intentional lie or a misunderstanding due to translation, but the statement by the President of the United States saying that he was the master of peace and he got another ceasefire put into place, and come today, Cambodia and Malaysia are trying to see if a ceasefire is possible, and Charnavarakul literally said in his own words today that the U.S. can kiss his ass and there will not be a ceasefire. That was just a flat-out incorrect statement or a flat-out lie, one or the other, that was made by the President of the United States. There is no ceasefire in Cambodia and Thailand. The war is not stopping. If anything, from what we've seen today, Thailand is ramping up their actions against Cambodia, and also Cambodia is ramping up their actions against Thailand. This is not ending anytime soon, and this has gone into a full-blown conflict at this point, whether the United States imagined it to end or not. We also heard an additional statement from the Cambodian government that they are now closing every border crossing with Thailand, according to the Cambodian Interior Ministry. This is a step away from peace, mind you all. Whenever the borders are completely shut down, that usually means that you're almost in a warlike footing or in a war footing with another country. So clearly, this is not going to be getting both countries closer to peace. In the meantime, we've also seen that there has been some fighting on the front. There is a lot of, I want to keep this in mind, folks, there is a huge amount of fighting today, as big as other days. Unfortunately, there just wasn't a lot of footage to come out for it. We did get some little glimpses, though, and we will be showing those here in a moment. But before we do, it does appear that a lot of people are talking at this moment about the Thai standing their ground and pretty much telling the United States that they can piss off. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what the United States is going to be doing next, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So, believe it or not, this is one of these rare polls where the options are almost equally split into thirds across all the different poll options, which is very unusual to see that, which tells me that as confused as people are on the poll, I think that kind of reflects the current U.S. foreign policy position as well. So, 32% said the USA will start threatening Thailand to agree to a ceasefire or else, while 31% said the U.S. will simply keep negotiating, and 30% said the USA will back off of the whole situation now that this has happened and we've gotten embarrassed yet again. So, honestly, the status quo, the MO of the current situation would usually be for the United States to start threatening Thailand because the main thing is the current MO, I guess you could call it, is it's all about control. If the U.S. says, we want a ceasefire, then, damn it, they want a ceasefire. They don't give a crap if it makes sense. They don't give a crap if it's fair. They don't care. They simply want the peace on their record to add that to the laundry list that some people debate is even accurate or not. They simply want to add that to a list of victories. So Thailand's not playing that game. They are probably the boldest country I've seen so far saying to get the hell out of our business and we're not playing these stupid games. And I would say the U.S. is not going to take kindly to that. They're going to probably start ramping up economic threats against Thailand over that whole situation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I actually got to be honest with y'all, folks. I'm about a split on all three options as y'all are in the poll. It could be any one of them. And to be entirely honest, the U.S. administration is so unpredictable, not in a good way. Some people try and make that sound like it's good. It's not good to be unpredictable. You look crazy, and you probably are. It's really hard to say what's going to be going on. I have no clue. The U.S. might completely back off and do the little, they can fight their little hearts out routine and act like somehow the U.S. is the victim in this whole thing when we're not even involved in the war directly. And we're also saying at the same time, folks, that the affairs of the world are none of our business. Don't y'all find that stupid? Like, I just got to bring that up. The President of the United States says that the world isn't our business and America needs to mind its own business and not get involved in world affairs and be the world police. But then we also are the world police and get involved in every single war, whether it affects us or not, and then tries to force a resolution to it. Isn't that kind of stupid and hypocritical? It is. Like, there is no, well, it's not. It's completely hypocritical. It's absolutely stupid. Because the United States is saying, we're practically going to try, at least the president's saying, we're going to try and strip our forces from everywhere in the world, Europe, East Asia, and elsewhere, and tell everyone to back down and not get involved in anything and don't escalate. But we're also going to go out of our way to sabotage and torpedo our alliances and partnerships that we have with other countries by getting involved in affairs that are none of our business and then trying to force a resolution. That's just so stupid. It's like it's one or the other. We're either the world police or we're not. And we don't get to, this isn't how most people live their lives, where it's rules for thee, not for me on this kind of a thing, or on most foreign policy where our enemies, whenever they do something, it's bad and atrocious, and when we do it, it's righteous and justified. This is dealing with our allies. We're either the world police or we're not. They're either on their own or they're not. They're not on their own until we get to stand to benefit from something like forcing an end to their war so that we can try and line up some dude for a Nobel. That doesn't make any sense at all. Like, that's just stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of is. You know what's weird is, and I'm not trying to get into politics here, folks, but I need to point this out because it's kind of interesting. Initially, it was all about, okay, we're not messing around with the rest of the world. It was very isolationist talk going on in the United States. Now it's gone from that crazy isolationist talk, which was a terrible idea. Now it's gone to, well, actually, we're going to be, quote unquote, America first, but we're going to be America first and also kind of like, hush hush, be the world police at the same time, because I need to make a laundry list of quote unquote peace agreements that I've done. It's all about, it's changed, folks, because it's all about a personal accomplishment, basically. He's realized, oh, wait a minute, I'm stacking up a couple of little wins here and there. I can start claiming this as a victory. So now all of a sudden it's gone from isolationism to we're going world police and then some beyond that, and even getting over involved in countries' dealings at this point.
I gotta say this, folks. Here's the thing I don't get. The whole concept, and this is the historical concept today and in the past in the 30s, of the American first idea, is that we're supposed to completely back off of everything in the world and completely abandon our sphere of influence that we have, which provides us with plenty, to just focus on America alone and leave everyone else out of everything and not get involved in anyone else's stuff. That's what the current administration has generally laid out in the National Defense Strategy, is supposedly the strategy. So we're completely abandoning everyone. There's no reason for anyone to even consider the United States to have a relationship with them because we're supposed to not. And we're working towards not having any relationships with anyone. But then we also sit there on the same token as we say we're completely isolating ourselves from the world. We then say, we're going to take Greenland from Denmark because we're going to have to face down the Russians and the Chinese in the Arctic, which we shouldn't be if we're isolationists because that's not our problem anymore. And then we also say we're invading, well, might be invading Canada, or we at least joke about it because we need to make sure that we have a direct connection to Alaska and so on, which doesn't make any sense. If we're isolationists, Canada's none of our business. Then we also say we have to end the war in Ukraine because people need to stop dying. But if we're isolationist, what does it matter if people are dying thousands of miles away on the other side of the world? That's none of our business. That's Europe's problem. They can figure it out. They can either let the killing go on and on and on, or let it stop. That wouldn't be our problem if we're actually isolationist. Then we sit there and threaten the Taliban to go invade their country and retake the Kabul air base to go and try and bomb the Chinese in the future. If we're isolationist, why in the world do we need the Bagram air base? And on top of that, why in the world are we going to bomb the Chinese? What in the world sense does that make? When India and Pakistan goes to war with each other, you know what we do? We go in there and we insult the Indians so badly, they completely run away from the Western world within a week and go straight back into China's lap and Russia's like a lapdog. For no reason.
Yeah.
If we were isolationists, that would have been none of our business, and we forced ourselves in there and got the worst end result. When it comes to the Middle East, we give Israel bombs out the kazoozle. Why in the world do we give the Israelis bombs? If we're isolationists, Hamas and Hezbollah, that's their problem. That's none of our concern. They can buy the bombs from us.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many people out there has read this yet, but if you go read the National Defense Authorization Act for 2026, it is almost the complete opposite of isolationism. It is, in fact, it is the world police and beyond when it comes to that whole National Defense Act for 2026. So, I mean, it's changed a lot. I mean, the current foreign policy has changed a lot. The problem is, though, me personally, I don't see any problem with the United States being the world police because we live in a very, very highly connected global world. So you can't be an isolationist in 2026. You simply cannot. So I'm in favor of being the world police within reason. Like, we can't get involved in everybody's fight. Like, we can't do that. That is wasting money, and also it's wasting our resources as the United States. But also we have to make sure, though, for these strategic areas, like for example in Europe with Ukraine, that's very important. Like for example in the Middle East with Israel, that's important. And then we have the situation in Asia with China and Taiwan, that's also very important. We need to focus on the big ones. We don't need to just be the world police on literally everything from small to large. We got to pick and choose what's the priority. And that's my huge problem right now is we don't have a real priority list of what we should be focusing on.
And also I saw someone say globalism is kind of dead. No, it's not. Globalism is the future. Like, I don't know if you know this, but the entire world exists on a globalist structure, whether people want to believe it or not. Our entire logistical infrastructure economically is globalist, and that's never changing back to anything else. The world, no country on the planet right now can exist without international trade. If a country completely cut itself off right now from international trade, it's going to end up quite poorly. And you know, there is one country, well, actually two, that have done that, and it's North Korea and Turkmenistan. And look at how bad off they are, especially North Korea. Look how bad off they are. They can't even get access to basic raw materials to do anything. They literally live like they're still in the 1800s in North Korea for the most part, just with AKs and some nuclear missiles. That took a huge amount of effort to even try and make, because they're so far behind everyone else. That is how you know globalism is alive and well, because if it wasn't, North Korea could be an easily successful country with a nationalist-based economy on a national market that's entirely self-sufficient, and yet it can. And so that clearly shows that globalism is alive and well. And on top of that, have you ever been to a major shipping port? Ever? Have you ever seen the flags of the ships that come to America's shores from Panama and elsewhere? Have you ever seen the size of these ships and known where their containers are coming from places like Singapore and Tokyo and elsewhere from around the world, from far-flung regions of the planet, all coming here to America from multiple different ends to either help us to make it end good or bringing us the end goods themselves? Globalism is alive and well. We live in that day and age. A denial of that is a denial of reality. And so for us to be able to be in the best position possible, we have to operate with the strategic concept that it is a globalist economic system, and we need to be the one at the top of the globalist economic system. That's the end result.
Yeah, honestly, if it was true, that isolationism actually worked, then how come they haven't done that? They've gone and done the complete opposite. So it's like, come on now. It's like if nobody thought that was going to work. I'm not even sure if the people that were pushing it thought it was going to work. It was just a good slogan at the time, and now they're realizing, well, we still have to be kind of globalist minded, even though we were bashing against it. But also at the same time, while we're being globalist minded, we can also rack up some victories and put them on our sheet to say that we have some victories. And some of them may be victories, some of them may arguably be not victories. It doesn't matter though. It's all simply for political reasons. But whatever the case is, we can't be isolationists. That's the bottom line. And also, we like the enforcer's right. And also, whoever said that in the live chat was very misguided. It's still a highly globalist world. Try to be isolationist in 2026, and you're going to get destroyed as a country. That's the way it works. China's Belt and Road Initiative is literally playing on the strengths of globalism, and it worked quite well. Like China actually did that quite well. They've actually gone in and taken over a lot of countries with this Belt and Road Initiative. And if the United States decides to go and be alone on their island over here on North America, then we're going to be screwed. Like, it's impossible. We can't do that.
Well, let's ask this question. This is even a better question to ask about globalism being dead. If globalism was dead, then why in the world is the Russian economy, which is now a national economy because it's been cut off from everyone else in the world, why isn't it succeeding? Why is it collapsing right now? We know it's collapsing. Everything's showing that it is in the midst of a horrendous collapse right now. And if a globalist system did not work and a nationalist system could succeed, then Russia would be succeeding right now just fine. And they're not. North Korea isn't. Cuba isn't. Cuba's been cut off, by the way, from most global trade. You know how the Cubans live? They don't even have electricity in most of the country or plumbing. They are literally living in the Stone Age down there. So, I mean, clearly a nationalist nation and a nationalist economic system and a nationalist economy does not work anymore. It cannot work. If it didn't, why in the world would the United States be participating in a globalist economic system? And we would be reaping the rewards of a larger GDP every year, more success, at least on paper by the metrics, although things are getting more expensive for everyone else. Why in the world would we still be succeeding in growing the economy, at least in number? That wouldn't happen.
Yeah. And it was like Pandora's box too. Once the world started going this global direction, it was kind of like nuclear weapons. There may have been countries out there that didn't want to develop nuclear weapons, but they had a philosophical aversion to it. They didn't want to get involved in weapons of mass destruction, which is understandable. But once the bottle was uncorked and the genie was let out, you had to get in on the nuclear game if you wanted to play in the world. Like you had to have them, or otherwise you'd be at a huge strategic disadvantage. Same thing with globalism as well. Like, for example, if the United States didn't delve into globalism, China naturally would have, which they did. And if we're not there to combat them on the global stage, then China's going to have a humongous advantage over the United States. They're going to have a huge economic, military, etc. They're going to be able to wipe us out one day if we were not globalists like that. So we had no choice. It was the same debate that sort of brought around nukes for all the countries around the world. We had to get in, or otherwise we were going to get demolished.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly the case, and the nation cannot survive, folks, without it reaching out into the world and doing what it does today. If we didn't do that, we wouldn't be around. And on top of that, folks, people talk about the good old days. A lot of people talk about the good old days of America. Oh, back, any time, pick a time. The late 1800s, which wasn't really a good time, or the early 1900s, which wasn't really a good time. But still, when you look at those times, you know what you would see? You'd see that America was growing and prospering. You know why we were growing and prospering? We were the number one trading partner in the world of practically everyone. Britain bought steel from us. We sold coal to them, which is kind of crazy. We ended up selling coal in Newcastle is how well we were doing. And that's unbelievable. That's unheard of in history. We were doing everything and anything around the world because we would trade. And it doesn't matter whether we're exporting or importing. It just matters that there is a flow of shit going one way or another, and if there's money being made. That's how it works. But anyways, with that, folks, it is time for us to move on from that and on down into the front lines of Thailand and Cambodia, because we still have news to cover here and a lot more around the world, including the hunt for Captain Crack Sparrow and everything else that has happened in Europe, including the Ukraine war. Moving us on down into the border areas, we have to move out to the Gulf of Thailand. And, you know, I gotta say, apparently, they didn't have to call this one the Gulf of America or anything like that. They didn't rename this one from the Gulf of Cambodia to the Gulf of Thailand. It was just already called that. But apparently, they have conducted a blockade today against Cambodia. You know, it's crazy, man. We were actually talking about this last night. And I was like, you know, it's probably going to be likely that they'll start a blockade because Cambodia has no navy. And it turned out that today, the Royal Thai Navy launched Operation Prachuap Kirikan Prachan Kiriket, deploying a special flotilla to protect the Gulf, hit the Cambodian military at sea, and cut their key supplies. It's a blockade.
Oh yeah, Prakhan Kirichan, Prakchan Kirikat. That's a hell of an operation right there. But seriously speaking, though, that's going to be bad for Cambodia because Cambodia really doesn't have a navy either. They don't have an air force, and they really don't have a navy.
Yeah, they don't have a navy, really at all. The Thai will absolutely demolish them if they try and break this blockade. So effective immediately, Cambodia is now blockaded by the Thai, which is a major action to be conducted by the Thai. Moving on into the area near to the sea, along the area of, I believe this is, I don't know the names of the provinces, folks. Y'all can kind of tell the names down here are very difficult to pronounce for an English speaker, so I'm not even going to attempt. But along the border around the Trot area, or the Trot province in Cambodia, the Thai Air Force conducted another strike on another casino. This is actually one that we saw yesterday. I just want to make that a little bit clear. This is the bombing of the Tmor Da Casino, which was directly along the border. It's the one with the golden dome. I'll show you all that one right here. This is the casino right here. You see that golden dome? The two wings right here with the noticeable roof profile, and then what appears to be possibly a parking lot right here. You will also see that in here, there is that parking lot looking building. It appears to not be a parking lot. And then you can see the dome and the interesting roof structures on the wings of the building. That is the same casino. And we actually got to see the Thai airstrike it in this clip from an F-16's targeting pod. And there was one direct hit. That's one hell of a hit right there. I mean, that was a huge bomb. And then they're going to hit it a second time over here near the dome.
Kind of a morbid question here, but do you think when they hit that with that missile, do you think it like triggered the jackpot for all the slot machines?
I mean, it could have. I mean, like, the vibrations would have been significant. But
You know, like those Mario coins, like hopping out the building, like I was talking about last time.
man, I mean, it could have. Like, I don't know. It's not out of the question. We also got to see that a major bridge in the nearby area was also destroyed by the Thai Air Force as well. Apparently, the Thai took a note from the Israelis, just use the biggest bombs possible, because all of these impacts are unbelievably large. At least 2,000 pounds in size or larger.
Also, by the way, we got some loony bots in here tonight. Like I've never seen trolling quite like this. This is a whole new level of crazy trolling.
Man, someone was talking about how in the world can we talk about war when there's floozies in America? It's like, well, hell, it's like
it's like you're comparing someone that's maybe a little promiscuous with someone that's a terrorist. It's like I think there's a huge difference between the two.
How the hell can we talk about paving the road when there's a hooker on Ninth? It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, it's like, what in the world type of logic is this? It's like, that has nothing to do with paving the road or anything else. Like, I gotta tell you, folks, sometimes the trolls put out pure comedy gold. Honestly, that one was comedic. But moving on from that and on up into the border area, we also got to see another Cambodian HQ getting hit in another airstrike by the Cambodians. Apparently, this airstrike was conducted by a JAS-39 Gripen. We're not going to show the clip, but you can see the impact right there, and it does appear that it was a direct hit. Moving on from that and further on up the border, we also saw Cambodian troops, according to reports, counterattacking near the Prasat Kana. One second, let me get this correct. Prasat Ka Na in Surim province in Thailand. We understand that there's also heavy fighting in Chang'an Ma and the Ubon Ratchathani province in Thailand as well. So there is significant fighting happening over most of the border area at this point. So moving on from that, we're now going to be moving on out to the Spratly Islands. And we're going to be watching the Filipino fishermen have to once again have a hoedown with the China Coast Guard and also the People's Liberation Army Navy. Again, this is once again China's ambition to push forward with the emphasis of the 9-dotted line in the South China Sea, which has absolutely no bearing in international law. But here's the clip. We see the fishermen here getting sprayed by the hose. And it's a high-powered hose, mind you all. It's very, very powerful.
China said, It will behave or gets the hose again.
And we can also see the Filipino Coast Guard here pulling up as well. It's a debacle. It's the same sort of stuff that we've been seeing from the Chinese for a while. It's still going on. Moving on from that, now to Southeast Asia. It's now time for us to move on, folks, to the hunt for Captain Crack Sparrow, because we have a little bit of news coming out of the hunt for Captain Crack Sparrow. First, I do want to say that we did see a little while ago some air activity of a U.S. Navy E-2 Greyhound on Flight Radar 24. It was actually just north of Curacao and was flying a path eastwards. It does show that the USS Gerald R. Ford's carrier groups or flight squads are still in operation at the moment. It's just that most of the transponders are off. In the meantime, this American Airlines flight is finally landing in Bonaire from Miami. So, just flying through the middle of a possible active war zone. But, as you all know, rain, sleet, or snow, American Airlines is going to drop you off. You might end up getting cussed out by the ground people at the ticket counter. That's a slight chance, but still, they will get you there. Moving on from that, though, we were able to see that more flights were being conducted in larger numbers earlier in the day, including 3 U.S. Navy FA-18 Super Hornets and also an E-2 Hawkeye. We were able to see the E-2 Hawkeye on Flight Radar recently, but it's now gone off of the radar. In the meantime, we have also seen that the Venezuelan government is apparently also using Flight Radar 24 as well. You can see it right back there in their HQ.
Also, by the way, I personally don't have the premium subscription to Flight Radar 24. Also, by the way, obviously everybody knows about it. It's a good platform, but I think they had the premium subscription. I think when you see that yellow little icon up there in the top and all the ads are disappeared, I think that's the premium.
Oh yeah, they got that premium. I got that premium. I got the premium, folks, because the ads are absolutely ludicrous. I don't know why the ads are what they are, but like there was some crazy ads that popped up on the air yesterday, and I was like, what the hell? So I took it off air, and then it was giving me ads for like medicine for the mange, like people that have like mange and stuff. I was like, why the hell am I getting these ads? Like, I've never seen ads like that in my life. Usually I get ads for like train rugs and stuff. But then it was just the craziest thing. But beyond that, they do use Flight Radar 24, which is indicating to us, folks, that we actually know as much as the Venezuelan military knows here on the channel as far as what's going on over their own skies. That's kind of crazy.
Also, their OPSEC is so bad. Like, notice, it looks like they have OBS back there on the computer. They've got all the kinds of tabs and bookmarks open, like, on their page right there. Like, I can't really see it here, but I could enhance that and see what they have in their bookmarks. I mean, they've got their whole desktop showing, like, on the thing back there in the middle of their security meeting, which is crazy.
Man, I mean, honestly, that is pretty crazy. Man, after they get done taking this picture, they're going to flip it back to YouTube or something in there.
Oh, yeah, totally. How to win Wars 101 with your favorite YouTuber.
Man, they're going to sit there and watch someone, and they're going to say, years and years from now, there's going to be a nuclear bomb, and it's going to burn people, like, and then there's going to be like some really nice stuff on screen, and everyone's going to be like, wow, it's going to be a great hit video. But beyond that, it does appear the Flight Radar 24 is used by the Venezuelans, so we can now confirm we know as much about their own airspace as they do. I gotta say something, folks. If y'all thought we weren't on our game, we're about as good off at getting military intelligence at this point as Venezuela, which isn't really a high honor, but still, it is showing that we know as much as they do. Moving on from that and on up into the U.S. of A., we did also get to hear a statement today that apparently, Matthew pointed this out greatly on Twitter, that in the new NDAA for 2026, it appears that the Congress has prohibited the Pentagon from unilaterally redirecting weapons intended for Ukraine to other needs. It also laid out a lot of other stuff, which, I'll be honest with y'all, I think the Congress, while it doesn't say this a lot openly, has gotten incredibly tired of the President of the United States foreign policy prerogatives and initiatives, because this NDAA, which was approved by the Congress, both the House and the Senate, pretty much goes completely against the current president's foreign policy in every way, including in this. And it's also stripping the president of a lot of his authority to unilaterally conduct actions that had not been approved or disapproved by the Congress. So quite interesting to see, and this is one of them. I'll read it off to y'all. Section K, accepting equipment back into stock. 1, in general, equipment procured to carry out this authority pursuant to subsection A may only be treated as stocks of the Department of Defense. Notice the defense. it's the technical name, if A, the equipment procured has not yet been transferred to the government of Ukraine and is no longer needed to support a program carried out pursuant to such subsection, or B, the equipment procured has been transferred to the government of Ukraine and is returned by Ukraine to the United States. 2. Notification. The Secretary may not transfer back into stock equipment described in paragraph 1 until the date that is 15 days after the date on which the Secretary submits a notification to Congress describing how the conditions of such paragraph were met. It's pretty much stripping the President and the Secretary of Defense from being able to just do really whatever they want. Hey, I gotta say, wow, the Congress apparently saw that poll that came out from the Reagan Foundation and went, man, we really need to change like a lot of how this is going on globally right now.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly. Also, by the way, I was doing some hardcore skimming through this thing. I think there's like almost like 3,000 pages or something like that in the National Defense Authorization Act, which is where this came from. It's massive. Like, this thing is huge, so it's not a light read. If you want to read it, you're reading a massive document. It's going to take you probably weeks to get through it. But this right here was buried right in the middle of it. It was like section 1226 of the entire document, like right in the middle of the 3,000 pages. So I'm not even sure if they're totally aware of this right here. I think they might have snuck this in. Someone might have snuck this into the thing and hoped that maybe nobody would notice it. But I doubt they're going to make a big deal about it. Like, they'll probably just leave this in there, and later they'll probably try to challenge it or something like that. But it was buried deep in that document.
It is. And also, I gotta say this, folks, for some people who keep coming in here and they keep saying it's the Department of War and it's the Secretary of War, I'll be honest with y'all, before the current administration came in office, I was all for the idea of changing the name back to the Department of War, considering that it's offensive and defensive in nature. But the president doesn't have the authority to change the name through executive order. The name of a department is actually defined by Congress and can only be changed by Congress. So the president saying we're going with the name Department of War, it is not legally binding at all. It is technically an unofficial side name or a nickname. So the technical name for the Department of Defense is the Department of Defense. And also, the Secretary of Defense is the Secretary of Defense, not the Secretary of War. That's actually how that works. Like I know a lot of people don't really think the law means a lot, but I believe in following the letter of the law to the extreme. And considering that it wasn't officially changed by the Congress, and the official name is still the Department of Defense and the Secretary of Defense, that's why on the channel we still call it the DoD and also the Secretary of Defense, or the SOD if you want to call them that. That might not be a good one. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that little bit of a detail well. But moving on from that, and on out of that news, it is time for us to move on into Europa, because we still have a lot of news to cover over here, and very little time. Moving on up to Sweden and Finland, we were able to see that they conducted a CBT sortie today, which was pretty cool to watch. You can see right here the Finnish FA-18s. The Finns actually use F-18s primarily as their main multi-role within the Finnish Air Force. Look at them.
Also, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, I think on December 16th, they're holding the rollout ceremony, I believe, for the F-35 inside of Finland, too.
Oh, yes, they are. But they'll be replacing the F-18s slowly and surely with F-35s. But for now, it's still the FA-18, which is a pretty good jet. A little bit crazy, though, that it's being used by their Air Force, because the FA-18 was built in the United States as generally a carrier-based aircraft, but funnily enough, the Swiss use the F-18 as their primary aircraft, and also the Finns also use the F-18 as their primary aircraft as well for their air forces. But moving on from that, and further on down and into Germany, we also were able to hear that the Chancellor Friedrich Merz made this statement today. He has stated that the decades of Pax Americana are largely over for us in Europe, and for us in Germany as well. It no longer exists as we knew it, and nostalgia won't change that. So it appears that Merz is generally losing confidence in the United States of America and is making that fairly public. In the meantime, FICO is now trying to step in on the possible liquidation of Russian financial assets. That's this guy right here. And he has stated that he'll actually be trying to conduct some form of a veto within the European Union to stop the liquidization of the Russian funds that would finance the war in Ukraine. So that is generally the ongoing development at the moment, and it's one hell of a thing to see right there that FICO's still doing his FICO stuff. I gotta say, no one's checked his FICO score recently, and I have to say, it's probably quite low. But moving on from that and on into the Russian Federation, the Ukrainian Armed Forces did conduct another significant drone attack overnight throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation. We were able to confirm that multiple impacts had been made by many, quite a many of these drones and missiles that were fired into the country. And that's right, missiles were used last night. In Veliki Novgorod, we were able to see that smoke is still rising from the Akron chemical plant, and according to the local authorities, folks, the smoke rising from pretty much the entire factory area is just simple startup procedures, nothing more. It's typical of this factory to have smoke billowing from every single manufacturing hall.
Yes, that's roasting on an open fire.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas everywhere you go. Man, it's not looking like Christmas out there. It's not the season of getting, it's the season, well, actually, it's not the season of giving in Russia, it's the season of getting, and they're getting hell. Man, what would you like for Christmas? Piss, hell on earth. But anyway. Wait, hold on, it was piss on the earth? Hell.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. Moving on down into Smolensk, we also were able to see that the power plant down here was also hit as well by the Ukrainians tonight. Here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane. Why is there a lane in their street, in their city called Santa Claus Lane? Also, moving on into our next clip, let's take another little look. Oh, that air defense. That air defense be air defensing. That's actually from Herdvitske. I don't know why that's included in a bundle here. Oh, sorry. Max25 actually put that in his caption. We'll get down to Herdvitske in a moment and cover that. But the power plant in Smolensk was hit. Meanwhile, we also were able to hear out of Moskva today that apparently they're running out of missiles. They can't produce them as quickly as they're losing them and firing them. So, doesn't appear that that's turning out all too well for them, just to cover that in a nutshell. And also, apparently today, now this was quite hilarious and comedic, I'd add. Putin left the leader of Pakistan, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, waiting for 40 minutes in the middle of the hall, which is very disrespectful, mind you. So, Shehbaz Sharif...
This was so embarrassing. This was like I get secondhand cringe from this situation. But go ahead.
Shehbaz Sharif, folks, he got so damn tired of Putin making him wait like he was a bitch that he just stormed literally right into the room that Putin was in. He was like, "Why am I waiting so long?" Now, that's pretty damn bad. Now, I'll just show y'all some little snippets out of this. You can see him walking towards the camera right here. You see his detail following him along with the Russian diplomats and office staff, which are starting to get worried that he's just practically storming in. And then you can see that he is bolted in there, and they closed the door, but he bolted in there to literally go ask, why the hell was it taking so long for me to get in here? What the hell's going on? So then we can see later that they tried to schmooze it over, and they gave him some tea and snacks and had him sit down like he was a part of the meeting with Erdogan. But I mean, I gotta tell y'all, folks, that's what you get when you deal with the Russians. You get some idiot like this who's in no position to do anything, and then he treats you like a dog and makes you wait 40 minutes. Who the hell makes a leader of a foreign country wait for 40 minutes? How disrespectful is that? I mean, like, from any country for that matter.
It's careless as hell. Also, me personally, I would tend to think that Putin did that on purpose. Like, you know, Putin's type like this really like malicious mindset, and obviously Putin's way beyond that at this point. He's just a straight up devil in the flesh at this point. I think he does this kind of stuff on purpose to, like, you know, put people in their place type deal. That's the way these people think like this. People like Putin. He probably did it to shame them in the public.
Yeah, it looks like it. But then Shehbaz Sharif just pulled off the ball and just walked in. What the hell has she got me waiting for? Like, it just confronted him directly. It's like, honestly, that was a pretty strong move by the Pakistanis, but that was also wildly disrespectful of the Russians. Once again, showing why you really don't want them as their friends, because it's like, this country, according to some people in the current office of the president, respects America. They don't respect anyone. They'll make even the leader of Pakistan, who's generally more friendly and more aligned with the Russians than we'll ever be, wait for 40 minutes. That's just wildly disrespectful. We also saw that because of that, the Ukrainian partisans were working hard today, and they got two successful derailments to occur. One in the Pervomaisky district of Orenburg, which you can see in these pictures here, and there was also a second derailment that occurred in the Penza Oblast, about 200 miles away in the west, that also caused a pretty decent car pileup, as well as a derailment on top of that. So, quite a nice little conclusion here. 2 derailments in a day. We're running good odds here. But before we get on down into the little city of Kupyansk and start covering all of the major developments that happened down there, a lot of people have actually been talking about the developments with the Germans, saying that the Pax Americana is over. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so the deal with the Pax Americana thing, basically to describe it, I'm having to pull this up, by the way, because I actually had to do research on Pax Americana. That's a term I haven't heard since like high school days or something, right there in the civics classes. So Pax Americana is basically Latin for American peace, and it describes the era of relative global peace and stability, primarily in the Western world, maintained by the dominant economic and military power of the United States after World War II. So Germany's saying that is over for Europe, and they're telling Europe to get prepared and basically to get ready to be on their own. And what are your thoughts? 58% said, I agree, they are on their own, while 26% said, I disagree, and relations will survive between Germany, the EU, and the United States. And 7% said, it's merely just rhetoric. So in the United States, we trade out leaders every 4 years. So temporarily, Pax Americana might be disappearing, at least for the moment, but it will not remain that way permanently. So Germany knows that as well, by the way. They're just saying this to sort of make it clear that they are not happy about the current situation. But I don't think this really, really bad approach is going to last very long. I don't think it will. The next person that comes in will likely undo it because it'll probably have devastating impacts by the time the next individual takes office. So I would say relations will survive. They'll be on basically life support for a while, the relations between the EU and the United States. It'll be on life support, but once there's a changing of the guard again, I think it'll go back to normal, or at least semi-normal. But Enforcer, what say you?
Now, you know something, folks, that's very interesting here is that the Pax Americana is one of 3 major phases of peace that we generally talk about within the Western world. There's 2 others, Matthew. Do you know them?
Not off the top of my head, no.
The Pax Romana, which was the Roman peace, or the Pax Roma is what some people call it, and then the Pax Britannica. The Pax Britannica was the British peace that came around because the British became the preeminent power on the globe, and that existed largely through most of the 1800s and on into the beginning of World War I. That's generally what they call the Pax Britannica. The Pax Americana has existed since the end of World War II, generally. And the Pax Romana was the longest lasting and was a peace that lasted for 400 years. The Pax Americana nor the Pax Britannica ever got close to ever reaching that sort of length. Usually, they are only about 80 to 100 years long. The Romans actually achieved a peace of about 400 straight years. With small border skirmishes happening from time to time, but no major conflicts or major external power ever threatening the Romans during that 400-year stint. But this is generally considered, at least at this point, by the Germans, to be the end of the Pax Americana, which is the 3rd major era of peace that we've had here in the West. I would generally say that this is, like Matthew said, not going to last all too long. The Pax Americana, and which has been created from our strong position globally, is going to return. There is no way in hell that this sort of a foreign policy approach is going to be continued on by anyone. It's wildly unpopular with the American public, which has already been reflected as having an effect on the Congress through the current NDAA that's been passed. It is wildly unpopular with our allies. It's not beneficial for our strategic or economic position. It is completely stupid and asinine from every direction. This will go down in history as the worst foreign policy approach that we've seen of the 21st century yet. It's as bad a foreign policy approach that we've seen practically never. I cannot think of a terrible foreign policy approach that the United States has ever taken deliberately. But this is the worst. Like out of any foreign policy approach that we've taken, I'm not even kidding, this is probably the worst one we've ever taken. So this will not last all too long, and this will most likely end quite soon. So with that, I hope that has addressed that well. And now, folks, it's time for us to move on into our last little bits of the strike information in occupied Ukraine and also in Russia, and then to get on into that frontline news that we haven't covered yet. Moving us on up in the Volgograd, into the Volgograd Oblast, and into the north of the Oblast, at this little city of Kupyansk. We were able to see a major attack happen from the Ukrainian armed forces today. This little town right here is a special town. It's a special town with a special place. They call it Putin's special little boy. And the reason why they call it Putin's special little boy is that there is an oil storage facility here that hasn't been blown up yet. Well, until today. But it hadn't been blown up yet until today. And that's what made the town of Kupyansk Putin's special little boy. The Ukrainians decided to remove that title from the town, and they obliterated the oil tanks that were within the city. Well, would you look at that? It looks like they're cooking. And let's take another look here at this next clip. I see him just looking at the cars and the fire in the background.
Is that a police buhanka right there that is zoomed in on?
Of course, Matthew, it's the Russian paddy wagon.
Wow, that is crazy. A police buhanka. I'm used to seeing those things burned out from the inside out from the Ukrainian drones. I can't believe it's an intact buhanka.
Halt, polizi. We've come in our clown car to put you under arrest, please. Man, I bet you that thing could fit many Russian policemen. And we also got to see one last clip of the oil facility that was slammed. Pretty much taking it from the same angle. But that's the end of the clips, and it does appear that the city was hit quite hardly overnight. Moving on from that and on down into the Caspian Sea, we also were able to hear that apparently 2 vessels carrying weapons from Iran to Russia were hit overnight. According to the information, the Kompozitor Rachmaninov, as well as the Oskar Serdzia, or Oskar Serdzia, were transporting Iranian components for drones and ballistic missiles when they were hit. Both vessels have been under U.S. sanctions since last year for their role in the Russian-Iran military logistics in the Caspian Sea. They apparently are just going to start blowing up stuff in the Caspian Sea all the time now, as far as the Ukrainian strikes go, which is pretty freaking cool. I mean, you know, we haven't been able to do anything in the Caspian Sea this whole war. And now the Ukrainians are reaching it easy peasy. Down in Krasnodar, speaking of which, in Ifipsky, we also saw that the Ifipsky refinery has also been hit again.
Я в шоке, что вон там все перегорело, вон там что-то хуйнуло. Ебать, я в ахуе, что у нас еще не выключили свет. Слава богу. Просто пизда темнота. И хуярит дым.
Well.
Ну, там
Also, look at this.
Просто все частные дома повырубало нахер. Ну там максимально.
It's pretty much the same clip. Also, moving on from that, we got some more footage. You want to see it? Of course you do. Oh! Man, that thing cooking. And then our last clip here of the Ifipsky refinery. That's at least a glimpse. Let's take a closer look. Wait, what's that noise? Is that the noise of the damned? I think it is. Oh, look, the gates of hell.
Oh wow, look, like a little mini nuke.
Он прям, блядь, в мою
Да ну нахуй.
пивнуху мою врезался. В ходыжи.
Come here.
Man, I tell you right there, I tell you. But moving on from that and on into Sevastopol, I'd also have to say, folks, that the bots tonight is something else, Matthew. I know you've seen them, but I gotta say, man, I keep seeing the bots, and I just keep seeing the craziest questions. Like someone asked, when are you two heading to the front? When our country needs us. That's the answer. When our country needs us.
I'll head to the front yard tomorrow morning when I go outside to get the mail.
You know, this guy asked, when are you going to the front? I'll get done with that when I'm done with your mother's bag. Oh, damn.
Oh, my God.
And then we'll be heading to the front.
Oh, my God. That's a violation.
Look, I'm just saying, look, a bot ought to not put in a heckle if they don't want to get heckled back, folks. That's the rule around here. We only conduct defensive actions. But when Article 5 is declared, there will be return fire, I tell yous. That will happen. But moving on from that, folks, we are moving on down into Simferopol, where we were able to see that the thermal plant was also hit overnight as well. Take a little look. That thing be cooking.
It's like a blast furnace.
Man, but blast furnaces usually have the fire inside of them where you can't see them. This one's an
This is
exposed
that new
blast. Man.
external blast furnace right here. This the model that it works more efficiently this way.
Man, it works quite efficiently, I tell you. Moving on from that, we also got to see that apparently the fuel shortage just returned back to Crimea. It was gone for basically no time at all. It was like a week and a half. We didn't even get to covering it, and now it's back. So most of the oblast is, or more so not the oblast, correction, the peninsula is completely without fuel. Meanwhile, north of Simferopol and Hervitske, the airfield came under attack, and it didn't look too well for the Russians. There's the spray and pray.
Oh.
Man. Oh, and it still hit.
Oh.
Man, that air defense fire stopped quick. Like, once that orange glow came from the ground, the air defense fire completely stopped. Watch, man. You look at this. Right here. Watch. They're all firing, and then boom, it hits, and then literally in that split second, all firing stopped.
That's money-saving measures right there. Can't waste a single piece of ammo extra, even though they were literally unloading a year's worth before it got hit.
Yeah, it's like, where in the hell were these guys shooting? Like, the drone was hitting over to the right. They're firing to the other direction.
If you got time to stand, you got time to sweep.
Man, honestly, man. Oh, man. They're just wanting to look busy. Also, by the way, we got to see near Odessa, a Russian Shahed do a belly flop on the water. That thing was kind of like revving. Oh, and there went the propeller. And now that thing is down and out. Little failure. And that ought to be a new name for a rapper, Little Failure. But anyways, moving on from that and on up into Kyiv, we also got to hear that Zelensky's apparently laying down the law, apparently taking a little bit of a note from a Newton Chernobyl on how to deal with the United States. Apparently the peace plan that he sent back to the U.S. rejected the withdrawals of troops from the Donbass and also completely removed the refusal for Ukraine to join NATO in the future. So I gotta say, Zelensky's starting to play a little bit well here. And I gotta say, I gotta get a bit of respect for him, for one, for how he manages his presidency in the midst of a war. Secondly, I also gotta say I respect that he's now getting a spine, especially after that council that he had with Germany, France, and Britain in Monday on London. And it seems as though he's starting to get around playing ball again, more so than just trying to appease the president, thinking that that'll eventually do something, because it's clearly not doing anything. Zelensky adapts and evolves, which is a thing that you're supposed to do. But moving on from that and on into the location unknowns, we also have a couple of interesting ones. One, we actually got to see that BMW grad from the other day actually working, which is really crazy to see. So here's the clips. The 7 Series grad.
They're laying it on them heavy with the beamer.
So here's my question, though. When this thing runs into engine problems, do they take this thing to the BMW dealership in Ukraine?
I can guarantee you this, because I've heard of it. I've heard people saying this, that no matter if they're on a battlefield, if they're getting shot at by the Russians, etc., the one thing that strikes the most fear in the Ukrainians is when the BMW service alert comes on. You hear the ding, ding, and they go, "Oh my God, Obliado, what's going on?"
Did you
Look
just
at
see
him.
that? Yo! Oh my God, they whipped it! Oh my God!
I tell you what, it's still Slavic to the core. You got, oh damn! Look at them!
Bro,
Look at
they
them
are
go, they're
whipping this
racing.
thing! Oh my God,
Man,
dude!
they're having a blast out here with this thing. You saw that smile on that guy's face? I hadn't seen a soldier smile like that in a minute. Look at this guy. Look at him.
Man, he's
Look at
having a
him. He is
blast.
crazy.
Like, bro, he's having a blast, man. Honestly, that is pretty damn cool, actually. We also got to see in our next clip what the Russians are dealing with. The Rasputitsa.
Now, that's not a BMW.
And that ain't going nowhere, sonny. Nowhere's at all. Everyone, if we spin the tires really hard while they're stuck in the mud, clearly this is going to help out our situation, and it's not just going to sink in the mud deeper. This makes a lot of sense in the Russian mind, but in everyone else's mind, they go, "Stupid idiots. Get a log or something and put it on the tire, you dumbass." Like, what are you, stupid?
Do you know how to get it out? Like, do you know how to get this thing out, by the way, if you were, like, really trying to get it out? Not the stupid way they're doing it.
You put a log under the tires, like on whatever whatever axle has the actual drive on it. You put a log near it so that way you can get a little bit of traction and lift itself up and out.
Yeah, you can do that, but if you have enough guys, though, you could put like 2 or 3 guys in the back, 2 or 3 guys in the front,
And then
you can
shake it.
simply sort of bounce it out. Like you can do it, push it back, push it forward a little bit. It'll eventually get enough momentum going to bounce it right out of the hole. But sitting there stomping the accelerator like that, they're literally digging the hole deeper.
Yeah, like, it's just insane.
Stupid. Look at them.
Let's slam the accelerator and push it back so that we would just dig a longer, deep trench.
See, this is something here. If you put Southerners on this, they could get this thing out there in a second. The Russians claim to be hardcore, and they also claim to know what they're doing, like from a survival scenario. I mean, look, I'm not like the most hardcore. I didn't even go mudding. Like, I didn't even really know much about it. I could get this thing out like in probably like less than 10 minutes.
I think anyone could. These guys literally lack brains. Let's keep digging a trench, Blair. Like, oh my god. And this guy's also just here for moral support. He's going, you got this, go Russia. Like, this guy's just
Look at that guy's
eating mud.
face. He's red in the face. He's literally, look at him. He's exerting everything he's got. He is red in the face. He's bloodshot.
Oh my god. And this stupid clown is still slamming the accelerator. Like, oh my god. But that's the
clutch,
Russians.
poor clutch. Like, let's have a moment of silence for that clutch that will be burned to hell.
But moving on, we also saw Adida. These we haven't seen in a while. These were actually provided by the Czech Republic, and it is a 155mm self-propelled gun, or self-propelled howitzer, or SPH or SPG, whichever one you want to say. Pretty cool vehicle, neat to see one. Now, it's time for us to move on to that casualty report. Holy moly!
Oh, 2 more Bobcats today. That's very good to see that. I love it.
Hey, yo. Bro, you went, oh. I mean, I was like, yo. I was like, man, I tell you, folks, you like do not let Matthew around the Bobcats. Like, I tell you. But beyond that, Ms. Disa, keeper of the records, has stated that troop losses for the 3rd day is plus 1,300, and December totals at 15,000 wounded and killed. That's just at this point of the month, by the way. AFVs are above average and other equipment close to average, and 2 Bobcat skid steers makes December total 16. That's more than 1 Bobcat a day in December. That's a pretty damn good running record right there. And, of course, over the past 24 hours, 1,300 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 9 APCs, 103 supply trucks, 3 main battle tanks, 24 artillery pieces, 283 drones, 1 MLRS, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. The Russians are losing a lot recently, and it does appear that the Kupyansk counteroffensive is a big reason as to why. Moving on into Vovchansk, we also saw the Ukrainians take some prisoners in the terms of foreign fighters within the area over the day, and this was quite an interesting sort of a catch here. Let's take a little gander at this. And
What is
also,
that truck that just pulled up over there, by the way? Do you see? Oh my goodness gracious! I think we're about to see something there that might not be on camera. Oh dear.
oh no, they're prisoners. They're alive. Like, it's nothing.
No, I mean, no, I'm saying you saw that guy winding up. You saw that wind up.
I didn't see that wind up.
Watching it, look at it.
Oh, I mean, he's.
Wind up.
It is what it is. Actually, it looks like that guy went out of control because the other guy admonished him here.
Man, I saw that last sucker punch coming from a mile right there. I was like, damn, that guy is winding the hell up.
Man, I didn't even see it, actually. But we can see here the usual lot of prisoners of war. The Ukrainians actually have a great disdain for anyone who's coming from foreign countries to fight for Russia. More so than the Russians, even. They have, like, it's like a straight vitriol and hatred for them, because they just don't understand why anyone would come from anywhere in the world to go to Russia, to go join the army, to help Russia invade another country. It's something that actually has been talked about extensively on channels like United 24 about the just bewilderment that the Ukrainians have as to why this many people are coming to Russia to fight on their behalf. And I also see some people asking where these mercenaries are from. They're mostly from Africa, usually Central African countries that are already war embroiled, like Chad, Sudan, and others, and they just take their skills of slaughtering from Central Africa and they bring them to Russia and use them in the service of the Russian army. A lot of them, though, which is kind of interesting, a lot of them, whenever they're interviewed in a prisoner of war camp, they always say that they were told by the Russian army that they're not going to be involved in any combatant operations. It's just that they're going to be helping to move around sandbags or ammo or something.
I feel like one of the Ukrainians about to be like, "Stop resisting! Stop resisting!"
I would have to say the rough-handed treatment of prisoners like this, though, folks, is getting right into the gray area territory of a war crime. They need to get that guy under control.
Yeah, he's a little bit of a loose cannon. Also, pretty stupid, also, by the way, for that guy to literally, he has his phone out right in front of him, too, while he's doing this. Not that I'm advocating for people to turn cameras off and start doing nasty stuff, but it just kind of adds to the stupidity of it on top of it.
Well, you see the motley crew here. Well, we see them continuing to film them here. But moving on from that, now to that clip, we're now going to be moving on past the Kupyansk front, because we already covered that earlier, and on down into Pokrovsk, where we also were able to see the assault and reconnaissance missions of the Ukrainian GRU, which is basically their version of the CIA to an extent. The GUR. And we see them here showing off their combat operations, blurring out some areas, and also firing down the hall. We can also see them working on a drone, carrying a couple, getting one drone up into place, getting it on in the building, slamming the target, taking out a Russian fiber optic, clearing the trenches. All of this, by the way, happening around the southern flank of Kupyansk, from what we know. Moving through, FaceTiming. Hello, mama, I'm in war. We're fighting to defend the city. Firing off some anti-tank weapons. Firing down a shipping container again. And also see them tending to wounded. Also rotating in and out. When you see them continuing to conduct attacks in the buildings, attempting to shoot down drones successfully, wildly enough. We can also see him here moving around, fixing the rifle sling here for a moment. We can also see
They've really gotten interesting now. The trees were dead and they were blurring it out.
Yeah, I guess they're very scared of geolocation these days, which is quite effective. Like, a lot of people can find out that stuff easy these days.
They're like, "Oh, look, the vegetation has died. Blur it out."
And now we see them on their way, and the Ukrainian flag fluttering in the breeze as they continue to hold the southern flank. Pretty impressive work. Moving on out of Pokrovsk and further down the front, and into the area of Enerhodar, we got to hear that apparently the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is without power again. The plant likely lost all external electricity supply, according to the IAEA. Each such blackout is a game of Russian roulette, and so far the luck is held, which is quite lucky, to be entirely honest. And the more often this happens, the higher the risk there will be a nuclear accident at this power plant. So once again, Russian mismanagement is increasing the chances of a possible disaster. But before we move on from that, I do want to say that a lot of people are talking about the fact that 4 of Turkey's ships, the Republic of Turkey's vessels, have been attacked by the Russians either in Ukrainian waters or near Ukrainian waters within the past 48 hours. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So now that Ukraine's really opened up the floodgates when it comes to striking Russian Shadow Fleet ships in the Black Sea and other places like that, it looks like Russia has responded by striking a whole bunch of ships that are doing commerce with Ukraine. So once again, I guess it's a tit for tat situation. I guess that's the best way to say it, but it's really gone full out tit for tat at this point. So the ships that are getting struck are allegedly all Turkish vessels, and apparently 4+ Turkish vessels have been struck in just the last 48 hours alone near Ukraine. So the question is, will Turkey respond to this provocation? So 52% said yes, Turkey is forced to respond for obvious reasons, while 28% said no, Turkey will not risk confrontation with Vladimir Putin, and 15% said it's too early to tell right now. So I'll be honest with y'all, I'm not sure if Turkey has the guts to take Putin head on this one. I don't think they do. Literally, Erdogan was staring Putin right in the eyes when one of these ships was getting struck by Putin's own forces. So I don't think Erdogan brought it up then, or at least we didn't hear about it in the public. He might have brought it up in private. But Turkey seems to be taking a very passive approach to this and basically getting punked by Putin, and they're not doing much about it. So I think they're going to let this continue. I don't think they're going to risk confrontation. I'm actually with the 28%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would also have to be with the 28% as well. I don't think that the Turks are going to risk confrontation with the Russians over this. Generally, the Turks try and keep somewhat middle-of-the-road relations with both Ukraine, Russia, the Balkans, and the Middle East. So it's highly unlikely that they're going to confront the Russians over this matter, because they also haven't confronted the Ukrainians over the fact that they hit the Kairos and the Virat almost inside of Turkish territorial waters. So that also would be something in the factor as well. The Turks really aren't responding to anyone at the moment, whether it's going to represent Turkey badly or not. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on up to Kyiv and to cover the speech from the president of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky. That's not supposed to start playing. I clicked pause and then it just started playing. But nevertheless, here is the speech. Peach!
Speech!
Шановні українці, зараз готуємось до зустрічі з американською стороною та нашими європейськими друзями найближчими днями. Берлін. Буде багато подій. Буде доповідь Умєрова та нашої переговорної команди по їхнім контактам, які вже відбулись. Генерал Гнатов та представники українського сектору оборони та безпеки працюватимуть щодо деталей гарантій безпеки для України, для українців. Одночасно триває розмова українських урядовців з Америкою та Європою щодо реального відновлення України, реального розвитку України після війни. Найголовніше будуть зустрічі у мене з представниками президента Трампа, також будуть зустрічі з нашими європейськими партнерами, з багатьма лідерами щодо фундаменту миру, політичної домовленості про закінчення війни. Зараз шанс значний, це важливо для кожного нашого міста, важливо для кожної нашої української громади. Ми працюємо для того, щоб мир для України був достойний, щоб була гарантія. Гарантія передусім того, що Росія не повернеться в Україну з третім вторгненням. Дякую всім партнерам, які допомагають нам, допомагають Україні. Ми будемо цими днями в Берліні максимально активно, максимально конструктивно працювати з усіма, хто дійсно може зробити угоду нормально. Будуть і подальші зустрічі та подальші контакти, але ми пам'ятаємо, наші українські позиції у перемовинах сильні, завдяки тому, що ми тримаємо позиції на фронті, в нашому оборонному виробництві, в нашій внутрішній стійкості. Україна сильна назовні тоді, коли у нас є сила всередині. І так це має бути і надалі. Тому всі наші підрозділи, які зараз виконують бойові завдання, кожен український воїн, всі оборонні підприємства, всі сили безпеки, всі мають старатись давати результат для України. Я дякую кожному, хто б'ється заради України, хто працює заради України саме так, для України, як для самого себе. Сьогодні весь день доповіді з регіонів, передусім з Одеси після російських ударів. Триває відновлення. Не просто, але задіяні всі необхідні сили. Я доручив урядовцям максимально прискорити процеси ремонтів, постачання обладнання, яке необхідно. І сьогодні також був удар Росії по ще одному цивільному судну у Чорному морі. Фактично це був удар по продовольчій безпеці. Власник судна – Туреччина. Вантаж – продовольство. Бити по таких судах, які не мають жодного стосунку до війни, прямий виклик Росії всьому світу. Ми будемо з партнерами розбиратися, як реагувати на це. Реакція буде. Також є нове санкційне рішення України, санкції проти російського флоту, танкерів та інших суден, які працюють на війну, які заробляють Путіну гроші, щоб він міг вбивати людей та затягувати з дипломатією. Обов'язково санкції будуть поширені і в інших юрисдикціях. Ми маємо про це домовленості з нашими партнерами. Ще одне важливий крок був сьогодні забезпечений. ГУР з Білорусі повернули 5 українців. Це наші цивільні громадяни. Разом з ними також в Україні зараз білоруські політичні в'язні, які були звільнені завдяки домовленостям з Америкою, зокрема серед них Марія Колесникова, Віктор Бабарико та інші. Я говорив сьогодні з Марією, радий, що люди нарешті на свободі. Також кілька разів спілкувався з генералом Будановим по ходу операції. Тепер важливо, щоб були результати на російському напрямку, щоб поновились обміни наших людей, наших полонених. Українські військові та цивільні мають повертатись додому з російського полону. За всіма лініями, з усіма партнерами робота має бути значно активізована. Я хочу подякувати всім, хто нам допомагає. Слава Україні!
Heroes Slava. And with that, folks, that is the end of the speech from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. And that's going to be moving us on to the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And I got to say, folks, that tonight was, once again, another long news segment. Back in the day, the news segments used to be about an hour and 40 minutes to 2 hours long. Nowadays, it's normal that they get on into 2 hours and 20 minutes long, pretty much on average. I do have to say, though, that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many people have once again considered the Enforcer channel to be their primary source of news again tonight, as about 100,000 people have watched the stream at this point, and we've had a peak viewership pretty much all night long, hovering around 12.2 thousand people. We thank everyone massively for spending your time here. We do know that you all have very busy lives and many things to do, and yet a lot of people choose to spend their time here, about 3 hours or 4 hours at least every day, watching the news and listening to what's going on. And for that, we're greatly appreciative, and we thank y'all for it. But with that in mind, folks, we're actually going to be taking a moment to get to talk to all of y'all for the remainder of the show, which probably will be about an hour and a half. And we're going to be making sure to address the super chats first, live chats second, and try and get to as many people as we can in the process. So, Matthew, what do we got?
And with that, folks, it is now time to jump into our final question segment of the night. So let's jump right back into our Super Chat questions. We are fresh out of polls, by the way, so it's time to jump right into our first one of the last segment. And this one goes to none other than Lord Cog. And Lord Cog is a longtime channel legend, by the way, and puts in a massive 200 smackaroos in the Super Chat. And a huge shout out to you, Lord Cog, for that massive support right there and helping to bankroll the channel as well. And Lord Cog simply said, thanks.
And thank you massively for the humongous support, Lord Cog. Unbelievably massive support. And we thank you incredibly for supporting this channel and helping it to keep running, because folks like you have been around for a very long time and help us to keep this thing running day in and day out. And I got to thank you incredibly for that, because massive support like that, big and small, helps us to keep this thing running and make this thing possible. So an absolutely humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that us address that the best we possibly can. And of course, a humongous thanks to you for always having been with the channel and continuing to support it so that way we can make news like this a reality every day. Hopefully the best news people are hearing out there on the internet. And of course, that's up to y'all. That's subject to review. We don't really know if it's the greatest or not, but a lot of people say it's pretty good. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one, but before we do, folks, we had another bot in here. We had another heckle, and we have to have a heckle put down. So someone said, you sound like you're experts at being stupid. I wonder what countries you've been president of. Well, what spirit...
He said experts at being stupid. I'll give credit. I'll give credit. That one got a chuckle out of me. Obviously, it's a bot. I don't like bots, but I will admit, like that's just blatantly wild.
That was a pretty good one. That was a pretty good one. But the rules are the rules. Them's the breaks. We got to have a heckler put down here, folks. All right. So I got to say, maybe we are experts at being stupid, but your name Wood Spirit doesn't mean that you're a spirit of the wood. It means that you're more so a spirit of the manly kind of wood. Not really the greatest thing to be the spirit of. But anyway, so that I hope that does address that somewhat well. Very interesting heckle right there. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, by the way, folks, since we were mentioning this earlier, I wanted to bring this up during the question segment. If Venezuela is using open source information, like, for example, from Flight Radar 24, which aggregates ADS-B aircraft data, which is all open source, by the way, and also Flight Radar went through a lot of trouble to set up, I think, a bunch of like receivers all over the place around the world to get that information, at least according to what I've heard. So I wonder if Venezuela's government is watching channels like ours and trying to figure out what's going on, because if their intel gathering capabilities are that weak that they're having to use open source information to keep their country's national defense up to date. That's pretty bad. That's pretty awful right there. So, Enforcer, I wanted to do something real quick. We do have statistics on where the viewers are generally from, not exact locations, but generally, like which country they're from. Could you pull it up on the second screen and see how many Venezuelan viewers? Because, obviously, I don't think a ton of people are probably watching an American live stream about international news in Venezuela. So I wonder what the number is of Venezuelans that watch this show. I wonder if their government is watching channels like ours, trying to figure out what's going on.
Well, that's an interesting question. I wouldn't be able to get the analytics for tonight, but I could get the analytics for last night, possibly. So let me see if I can. And let's see here. We want to look for the geography.
Because if they are watching, I wonder if a little scare or something like that might interest Venezuela. Like, for example, if there was a rumor out there that maybe some F-18s were about to go into Venezuela, I would hate for them to hear about that.
So let's see here. Top geographies. We're looking for that. All right. So, actually, Matthew, they made it to where I can't pull it on screen because it literally shows every single analytic instead of just one. So,
just what's the raw number? Like, does it say the percentage of the raw number of viewers we get from Venezuela? It should have like a number generally there.
Kenya, Colombia, Argentina, Iceland, Nigeria, Slovakia, Hungary, Ukraine, Slovenia, Indonesia, Singapore, Jamaica, Latvia, let's see. I'm not seeing Venezuela on the list. Because
Not at all.
It only shows the top 50, and we have apparently no viewers from Venezuela.
Oh, dang. Well, it's possible they're using a VPN. It could be possible they're doing that too. So you never can tell. But
that brings us to tonight's sponsor. I'm just kidding.
Whoa.
I'm just playing. Go ahead. What are you saying?
I'll tell you what. No sponsors here. I'll tell you what. But I tell you, I would imagine that Maduro is probably watching YouTube channels. I would imagine if he's doing a podcast, which is obviously like a techno bro type deal to do that. He's also doing like open source intel gathering and things like that. Venezuela's intel must be trashy, very, very trashy when it comes to actually getting any type of usable intelligence. So I wouldn't be surprised at all.
I wouldn't be that surprised myself. But that's something that's quite interesting, folks, is that the 50th largest viewership category on our channel for the past 28 days has been Kenya, with 2,586 views over a month about. What's interesting is that Ukraine has only made up for 4,312 of our views over the past month. Let's see here. Hold up, folks. Trying to see. Russia is not on the list. So that.
I wonder why.
I wonder why. Oh, we get 8,176 views from Israel. We get 8,775 from Austria. We get 12,400 views from Japan. We also get the same amount of views from Mexico. And we also get the same amount of views from Spain. I'm living in Spain without the S. Something in the rain. But anyways, moving on from that. We get 24,000 views from India. 25,000 views from South Africa. And then we are pretty much in the tops. And the United States makes up 64% of our viewership. Over the past month, we've had 5.1 million views, and the Americans account for 3.3 million of them. So the Americans are the lion's share of the audience. So with that,
those silly Americans.
Oh, those silly Americans. Heavens. But beyond that, this thing came from Scarborough. Oh, it just warped. Oh, look, it's flying away. Man, this thing's flying at light speed right here. Look at it go.
Look at that thing. It's leaving.
Man, that thing left. Like it's gone, past tense. Not really a lot of flights.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine though if I saw someone go off a minute ago. They're like, they're not listening to your channel, bro. Hey, look, like I don't know if they are or not, but if they were listening and they heard the other night like the talk about, oh, it looks like an F-18 went to their territory. They're like, oh my god, we're being attacked. Some call the army, call the navy. Sir, raise the army, sir.
I was about to do that.
Where the guns, sir? I said, BB better not blow up my nuclear shit or I'm gonna go loco on this bitch.
Man, honestly, man, I mean, some people say they're not listening to your channel. You don't know who's listening to this channel. I mean, hell, we had a former CIA director put us in his history book on the war in Ukraine because he watches the channel. Like, there's a lot of people who watch this channel. The vice president's cousin watches the channel.
But we're not feds. We're not feds.
Yeah, we're not feds, but like practically everyone out there watches the channel. So it's not like out of the question. I don't know why some people act offended when we ask that. Like, it's not a question like that's absurd or narcissistic. We've learned over the years that literally we don't even know who's watching the channel, but there's all kinds of crazy people who are watching the channel, and then we find out about them. Like, for example, one of the more interesting people who watches the show would be the foreign minister of the Czech Republic who follows us on Twitter, among many other people like that. So, it's not out of the question. We have literal foreign ministers who watch the show. So, saying, are the Venezuelans watching? I mean, it's not really that out of the question, to say that they might be watching. I mean, hell, like, shit. There's a lot of people out there who are watching the show, folks. I mean, if you look at the metrics on our stream, whenever we're live on YouTube, we're usually one of the largest live streams live at the time. And then over the day, we're usually in the top 50 largest streams in America. So, it's not out of the question. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I knows. And, I only knows what I knows. Don't judge me for it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to none other than Tim. And thank you very much, Tim58, for that very generous $100 support right there. Very massive support, and we do appreciate that. And Tim said, I am 100% behind what you said about our so-called foreign policy and about being the world police. And it's been a while since I've heard talk like this, and I'm beside myself on how we have treated our allies, and I only wish that Washington would get their head out of their ass.
I would agree. I thank you so much for the support and agreeing with it, because common sense isn't really common, is what the old saying is. And the more that we've been out here, the more it becomes apparent that is the case. And it's really crazy to me. And I gotta rephrase something that I said the other night, because I said it and then I got off air and I started thinking about it. I was like, well, that didn't really cover it. I said on air a couple of nights ago, why in the world do we elect into the Congress people who have like high school diplomas and were working as McDonald's managers, and then we act like they know everything about foreign policy? But I also have to amend that a good bit. Why in the world do we elect people who were businessmen, who have no idea on foreign policy or administration or governance? And why in the world do we listen to people who are multi-billionaires that work on like rockets and websites and stuff that have no clue on foreign policy? They only know a good bit about business and how to be a cutthroat, and then we listen to them on foreign policy like they know something about it. Like, why in the world do we listen, folks, as a nation, or pretend to put trust and value in voices of people who never had an inkling of care or an inclination to care about foreign policy, but now that they want to have a say in it, everyone acts like their say counts. And I just don't get it. It doesn't matter whether Because?
Oh, are you there? I think we're lagging a little bit. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Are you here? I'm here.
Yeah, it keeps cutting out. Like I just heard it like bleep there for a second. That's something weird. But I was about to say real quick. The weird thing is people associate people that are like billionaires and stuff like that. People that have big money, they instantly associate that with, oh well, they couldn't have became a billionaire unless they're a genius, so they must be a genius. So that's why people think that they elect these people because they believe the money equals intelligence, and that's why they're electing them.
But money doesn't equal intelligence at all. There's a lot of stupid rich people. I would be kind of honest with you all. A lot of rich people are categorically smart, but stupid beyond that. They're really good at one thing, and that's it. So, look at any billionaire. There's one that runs some website. It's like a book of faces or something. He's good at running a website, good at running tech businesses. Probably not good at anything else, I'd assume, because he hasn't really done much anything else from what I know. There's another guy who runs a business that makes cars and rockets. Pretty decently okay at making the cars and the rockets, but I don't really think he's got a lot of knowledge on anything else, because most of the takes I hear from that guy are absolutely shit. And so on and so forth. And there's a lot of people in the Congress like that too. Like loads of them. They have no clue what they're talking about, and they get elected, and they still have no clue what they're talking about. And they don't ever put any effort or any research into anything. Like when we talk on this channel, folks, I'll sit there and tell you, oh, the war in Thailand and Cambodia started. And then I go off air after we cover the beginning of the conflict when the 7/11 war happened. I went off air and started reading about the relations between those two countries to become as much of an expert, not really an expert, but as well informed as I could possibly be to tell y'all the rundown of why they're even in a war today, or in the last war, in the 7/11 war. And even now, I still give you all that context, and I read into it and researched it to find out. And then I look into all the other statistics as well, their economic relations with each other, their economic relations with the outside world, their foreign policy relations with surrounding countries, so on and so forth, the standing of their military, their funding, their budget. I look into all that stuff to come up with an idea of what might happen. A lot of representatives and Congress members and senators, they don't even do that. They have no knowledge on the subject. They'll go and read the Congressional Research Service's report, which is a page long. And I will say the Congressional Research Service does a great job at significantly shrinking things down into a nutshell summary. But a nutshell summary does not give one an understanding of the intricacies that are involved in foreign policy. But then those people will read that, and then they'll repeat like a couple of the bullet points that the CRS puts out, and then they act like they're now a subject matter expert to talk about foreign affairs, when they still have not a damn clue about how foreign affairs work and all of the millions of components that are at work in that machine, that if you just start popping cogs out of that machine, it's going to explode and it's not going to turn out well. And it just really annoys me to look at the foreign policy that we're seeing right now and seeing that people have been at the helm like this, I would say really since about 2016 on up until now. I would say that it was already kind of going on the downslope before that, but it's been absolutely abhorrent since 2016. The foreign policy makes no sense at all. It is honestly, at this point, it has been un-American or anti-American for about 9 years now, running on into 10 here soon. And it does not represent our nation's interest, it doesn't represent our sphere's interest, and it doesn't represent our economic interests or anything for that matter. And when you say that, then people want to go, oh, and I guess you're an expert, you guy on YouTube. And it's like, if the current people who are in charge in the Congress and the office of the president are supposedly experts, I'm far more of an expert than they are. Like, you know, it's like for one, before they got elected, at least before the president got elected, he was into real estate and any other business that you could put his name on. That doesn't account to any foreign policy experience whatsoever. I have no foreign policy experience to speak of myself, but I have read and researched plenty about it, and considering that there's really no way for anyone to have foreign policy experience until you're elected into an office to deal with it, that's about the best you can have starting off. You know, I don't know why in the world people say, do you have any experience in foreign policy? It's like, did the president have any when he was elected in 2016? Or did the president from 2020 to 2024 have any experience in foreign policy before he was the vice president of the United States in 2008? No. It's like, none of them did. It's like, but you still have to have a decent footwork of understanding how it all works before you get involved in actually calling the shots. And a lot of these people don't have any clue. None of the billionaires do, none of the Congress members do, none of the presidents do. And then they make the calls and they make the shots. And only because they've built up a cult around both of these political parties do the followers of those parties pretend like their people know what they're doing when they don't. And if you don't believe me, you can just look at Thailand and Cambodia. Someone just said unsubscribe. Good. If you can't handle the truth, you probably don't need to be here. You're probably too fragile. Look at Thailand and Cambodia. I sat here on the channel, and Enforcer Matt was right here with me, and I said, cheap ceasefires don't work, and cheap peace treaties don't work. They didn't fix these key issues here, there, and hither, and this is going to start up again for sure before the end of the year. And guess what, folks? Like prophecy, because it doesn't take a lot to know this stuff, it happened. Another war started because it didn't fix any underlying issues. They still hated each other, and they were looking at any excuse to go back to war. Got it dead on the nail. Didn't have to know a lot there, you know. And that's the other thing, folks. Everyone acts like this is some sort of an intricate science. I can tell you personally that if you just dedicate yourself to it and research it a lot and learn about it a lot, and you don't sit there and act like a political party has the answers, one or the other, and you just look at it from a clinical perspective, the answers are very easy to get and very easy to come to the conclusions of. It would take a literal idiot that doesn't dedicate themselves and is lazy and doesn't think beyond their nose to get this kind of stuff wrong. Like, we're not even, like, we are not magic with what we do here on this channel, folks. It is a simple formula that we do. We do all the research, we do all the effort, we generally know how foreign policy works. And once you know that, you can spit out answers of how things are going to go pretty consistently, and it usually goes that way. That's just how it works. You don't have to know a lot. Like, you don't have to be an expert. This is something the entire nation could do if the people put their mind to it, is that they could also be quote unquote foreign policy experts as well. Doesn't take a genius. We're not geniuses, and we do it. Anyone can do it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And a big thanks to you so much for the support. And I have to say, thank you for agreeing with me. And with that, we are actually going to be getting on into this poll because it seems as though there's been a poll on wealth. And I don't know, Matthew, are you becoming Marxist? And what are people thinking about this?
So honestly, folks, this is a very off-the-wall poll, I will admit. Some people got triggered by the poll, which, I never can tell what's going to trigger people. Like, some people went berserk over this poll. I have no idea why. I guess talking about people with wealth, I guess, is apparently triggering for some. But to me, I just look at it as another data point, personally. But the poll question here says, when you see someone that is wealthy or rich, what is your initial reaction to that person? I was just curious what people thought. This is the most oddly distributed poll I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen one quite distributed like this. 29% said they must be ruthless or brutal, while 27% said they must be clever or sneaky. 23% said they must be good problem solvers, and 21% said they must be intelligent or smart. So interesting with that. Interesting. There's no right answer here, by the way. Like, whatever people's reaction are of wealthy people, me personally, it's a free country. You can think whatever you want about whoever. I usually think they must have been ruthless or brutal because in the capitalist system, in order to build a lot of wealth, you have to not only be cunning, but you also have to be a little bit brutal too, because there's competition that crops up. And unless you're willing to make these harsh decisions to ruin that competition, then you likely won't become wealthy. So I'm with the 29%, but once again, there's no right or wrong answer here. Also, disclaimer, I don't hate wealthy people, by the way. I'm not one of these people that's like, oh, damn those wealthy people. If someone got wealthy, I mean, it's a free country. I mean, they can do what they want. As long as it was legally done, then they have the right to have the wealth. So I'm not one of these people that's like, oh, screw those wealthy people, it's bastards. I still think that they ought to be altruistic and ought to be kind to people, even though they're wealthy, but we can't control that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have to say I'm one of the 29%. Most people who are in the top 1% are ruthless and brutal. If you ever listen, and that's not talking about the current day, that's just talking about historically. If you ever listen to anyone who's ever become something in this country, Andrew Carnegie or Cornelius Vanderbilt or any of those people, they were absolutely cutthroat in their business dealings. Heartless, really, to other people. They would screw people over in a minute to get ahead. And that's how it works. Like, in business, that's just how it is. Because there's, generally back then especially, it was a truly lawless land. You could do anything. So the more cutthroat you were, the more successful you become. Some people just can't make the tough moral choices to get ahead like that. But as far as it is these days, I would say that it still stands. Not to say that that's a bad thing. I mean, that's what gets them ahead. So maybe that's something to pursue as a lifestyle if you want to get ahead like that. But me personally, I don't really like the idea of being like that myself. I'm not really one to try and make the moral calls to possibly screw over business associates and other people to try and move on forward and get ahead. So that's what my general assessment would be. Not that I heavily dislike them. There's people of different cuts of cloth in this country in every way, and every one of them have their part to play. But at the same time, that's just the reality of things. Not to say that, people who aren't rich are nice little lilies. There's a lot of angry, poor people who are very violent and cutthroat as well, but apparently they just don't know how to direct their energy towards trying to, screw over other people in business dealings to get ahead. So, with that, I hope that...
Also, by the way, I want to make this clear because some people instantly read into statements way too deep. I don't hate wealthy people. I don't hate rich people, by the way. I know some people that are considered wealthy and things like that, and I'm friends with people that are considered wealthy and stuff like that. So it's not like I'm saying, screw those people or something like that. There's plenty of wealthy people out there that are kind people, that are not ruthless and are not, bastards and things like that. There are certainly the ruthless ones out there. They're usually the most vocal and loud ones too. but also they're a subsect. That's why it's kind of difficult to make generalizations as well, because, you can't just say everybody in a certain group is one way. There's a majority that act that way, but there's also not all of them. There's plenty of people out there that have money that aren't sickos, basically. But also, some people believe that money corrupts people, and I would tend to say money can corrupt people, but you have to have a corruptible personality to begin with to get to that point, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, let's see. And a lot of people are saying that people are people. That's true. And it's really a case by case basis. But let me ask you this. Here's the real question here. If you come up on a billionaire, what are the high chances that they're going to be nice to you, or that they're going to brush you aside and treat you like you don't exist? And most of the time, I would say that they're probably going to brush you aside and treat you like you don't exist. That's at least what I would think. I've never run into a billionaire, but I have run into people who are multimillionaires, and I'm talking about people who have like tens of millions of dollars to their name, and they're already majority-wise getting into that category. There are some very nice ones, but majority, the ones that I've run to, are getting into that category of kind of being cutthroat and ruthless, and not really treating people like people anymore, but treating people like assets to be used and then expended once their usefulness has expired. So, that would be more so my personal assessment from my own personal experience, because some people may or may not know this, but when we were growing up, we kind of, we lived in our house. It was a normal house when we first were growing up in Montgomery, but by the time we moved out, our dad was a wildly successful attorney, and we were living amongst the multimillionaires and such. And I would be honest with you all, out of the two different lifestyles that we had basically growing up, I would much rather go with the normal one than the one being around the multimillionaires. And I'm talking about the ones with tens of millions, because they don't really act like normal people at that point anymore. They're very connected to status. They'll only associate with you if you have status or some sort of an ability that they don't have that they want to get. And once they get that from you, they throw you away. And that's generally how a lot of those people acted. And I was like, that's not for me. And then Sergeant Sagi said, must have had rich parents. Yeah, and we still went to public school, and we still had to get jobs and everything. So,
and we went to public college too.
Yeah, we went to public college and everything. So, we went through the whole normal process of growing up, which also made us completely detached when we finally when our dad got the house in Birmingham that we were living in until we made Enforcer HQ 2.0, which was our own place. We were around those kinds of people that lived around us, and they weren't nice people mostly, like at all. And also on top of that, we couldn't really connect with them because we grew up generally with a very normal life. Like, we lived in a mostly normal house when we were in middle school, high school, and elementary. We went to public school. We dealt with all the crazy public school stuff. Y'all have heard all of our stories from growing up. Well, honestly, it was kind of a little bit more extreme than most people would have normally, apparently. But we grew up with that sort of life. We grew up around normal people. We had to go get jobs when we turned 16 and 17 and stuff. We were working in the middle of school. We would get out of school and we'd go to a job. We did everything like any normal person would. And so whenever we would get around these literal rich kids, like the kids who were treated like they were rich growing up, we could never really connect to them because they would always have this self-inflated idea that they're really something, and it was really supported by nothing. And we wouldn't get it because we'd be like, you only have your job because your parents run the company you're in and they put you in that position. Like, you didn't work to get to that. It was given to you by your parents. There's nepotism going on there. It's not something, you're not a hot shot. It was literally just given to you, and that's it's a very different sort of a deal to live with that. It's like, what the hell is going on here? It didn't make sense to us and we couldn't connect to it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Howard Mendelson, who puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Howard, for that support.
Hey!
Once again, we do appreciate that. Very generous. He said, first, let's see here. Goodness. Howard, with this one right here, I'll be honest with you, I understand what you're saying, and I don't necessarily have an issue with saying it, but I don't know, Enforcer, what do you think about this one? Also, by the way, first of all, a huge shout out to Howard for that support. I don't want to act like we're just blowing it off or something like that, but what do you think about that super chat?
I'm going to say that I don't think we can read it off because I'm not really sure, if they're going to try and set the dogs on us. But one thing I would say is that, how do I say it? How do I say it without saying it? I definitely see that. and I would generally kind of agree with it, to be entirely honest. But I don't think we can read it off on there, though. But I hope that answers that the best I can. But a humongous thanks to you for the support, Howard Mendelson. You were an old guard and a channel legend, and we thank you massively for the support and help with this channel to keep it running. And I hope we addressed it the best we can. But I also want to say we don't want to get heat, because these days there's a decent amount of heat people can get for just saying stuff. And so I do thank you massively for the support and help with this channel to keep on running. But I also hope you understand, Howard Mendelson, we have to try and avoid that heat. That's down.
Yeah, you know, it's quite interesting now. You're talking about the heat. What he's referring to is lawfare. In the modern day, it's become common. It used to not really be like this, but government officials are starting to make the habit of using the courts and suing people and starting really expensive litigation to shut people up, basically. That's becoming very common now. You might have heard there's another popular YouTuber right now who runs a podcast that's actually getting threatened with a lawsuit over speaking his mind about a certain congressman out there. So he's the congressman. There's not the only one threatening that, by the way, with lawsuits and stuff like that. There's also other people that are holding, executive branch positions that love to threaten lawsuits to shut people up. And it is a valid threat. The lawsuit threat is, at least, because it's expensive to defend stuff. So someone tries to sue you or something and, sue you for defamation. They may or may not have a case. It's kind of up for debate whether or not they have a case sometimes, but it's the cost of having to go hire that attorney to go fight that situation that actually destroys people. That's the part that gets people. And some of these people know this, and they'll go do that. So it's malicious. Yes, it's malicious, but also it's a real threat too. You gotta worry about it.
Yeah, because how it works is that they could allege some sort of slander or defamation or libel or something along those lines, and then they can start a case against you, and you have to defend yourself, because in those sorts of cases, it's actually presumed that you're guilty until proven innocent. Unlike most other precedents, you have to actually prove at that point, if a case is brought against you, that your statements were true in court. So you're actually defending your own innocence, because you're assumed to be guilty unless you prove innocence, otherwise proving your claim. So that can take a while to get through the court system, and then also it could be incredibly costly. So basically, they might not even win. The case might get thrown out, but they will try and bankrupt you in the process. It's absolutely messed up how that's being abused these days, but that's how it is. So we have to be kind of careful about saying stuff like that now, because you never know what could come around the corner. And I can also tell y'all that as far as the fish out here in the pond, we're not the biggest fish, especially when it comes to funds, and we wouldn't be able to fight a case like that indefinitely, like they could. So we generally have to be a little bit careful about moving around stuff like that and trying to talk about it, but also not say it directly to where something like that could come back to get us. But a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Jack Ray. And Jack Ray puts in a $25 support, and thank you very much, good sir, for the support as well. He said, some steer the ship of international state relations like a cruise ship, and some like a heavy warship, and some like a drunk swerving all around over the place, running aground, backing up and on. And guess which one we have?
I'm sure it's the drunk one. I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And it's always funny, because it is true, there really is only about 3 approaches, and those would be the 3. And I generally go with the approach of sailing a warship around, and it's kind of funny how people say that that's warmongering, because it's like, it's not warmongering, it's only going to create a war if these people don't back off. That's basically what it comes down to. And of course, I don't say that on every situation. We have to be careful with the Chinese, but beyond that, a lot of these other situations we could be selling a battleship around in, and we're not, and I don't know why, because we could easily win that confrontation just on the show of force alone. But still, I hope that has addressed it the best I can, and a big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Robert Krogan, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Robert, for that support. And we do appreciate that as well. And he said, good evening, enforcers. And the entire LSA grabbed chicken on me and watching it snow, and take a question from the chat.
Hey, and thank you so much for the chicken fund. We love the chicken, and we have to have the chicken. And I gotta thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep going, because if it wasn't for folks like you, the entire Lee Spring Army wouldn't be able to have a chili bowl or a chicken on you. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we're on to the next one.
And our next one here, also, by the way, I see all the people talking about the lawfare, by the way. I just want to explain one other thing because it's kind of interesting to me. Like some people know about it. I think we know about it a little bit because we grew up in a household where the legal system was in our household because our father was an attorney. And also I went to law school for an entire year. So we kind of know a little bit about it. But if someone goes out of their way, by the way, just as a fact, someone goes out of their way to like sue somebody and they know they really don't have a case, but they're doing it simply to shut somebody up, that can be known. And once again, I'm not naming anybody in specific here, so I'm not making an allegation towards somebody in specific. But in general, though, that can be considered a frivolous lawsuit, which actually can open the person up to liability that filed the frivolous lawsuit. So I've seen that happen in the past. I've seen that firsthand when I was working as a paralegal back during my earlier years. There would be people that would file frivolous lawsuits knowing they did not have a case. And there would be attorneys stupid enough to actually go through with filing that lawsuit on behalf of a client. And then their client would get in some very deep trouble if it was determined by a judge that was a frivolous lawsuit. So that's something as well. If that starts happening, it can actually turn the entire tables around, and the plaintiff can end up having to pay a lot of money for filing that lawsuit. And I've seen it happen before.
Oh yeah, this happened. This happened several times. And also, there's another thing that can happen, which is where if you do not show up to court in a civil proceeding, there is something called a default judgment. Summary judgment is different, but a default judgment, this is something interesting because some people think, like, I don't know how people think this, but some people actually do. If I don't show up to court on like a civil case, they have nothing against me. And if I don't get an attorney, they have nothing against me. They'll just enter a default judgment at that point, which means the other side can really ask for whatever they want, and it's probably going to be approved. So that's also another interesting thing, and this has actually happened before. I won't say the specific instance, but somebody got sued for, I believe it was defamation due to some claims that they made about an event, and they said that it didn't happen. So from what I understand on that hypothetical scenario, not speaking about anything in particular, although this might seem similar to a real-life story you may have heard, this has no semblance at all to a real-life story. This is a fictional event. But in this scenario, someone said that something that happened did not happen. So a whole bunch of these people came together to sue this person because this person was lying. So, or at least they alleged that this person was lying. So they went to court, they filed the lawsuit, and then the day came around for trial, and the other side, the defendant, never showed up and their attorney didn't either, which left the plaintiff and their crowd of clients as the only people there on the day of the trial. So considering that the defendant did not show up, they entered what was called default judgment, which is where they said, what money value do you want? Because the other people didn't even have the respect to the court to show up at all to even defend their case. What do y'all want? So the other side said, we want $1 billion. They said, all right, default judgment rule in your favor, you get $1 billion. And then they said, all right, the jury's dismissed, case is dismissed. Thank you all, have a great day. And then they all left. And that's what generally happened. You gotta like the legal system has a set of rules. It is in usually for federal court the U.S. code, or it's in your state codes or your state laws on how the courts work. And generally it's a set standard mostly on how they work, although it can be different from state to state. But that's one important thing, folks. If you get sued in a civil case, you have to get an attorney, and you have to show up to the trial if it gets to a trial. If you don't, default judgment will be entered against you, and that is absolutely horrific. There's no way to reverse that, by the way, once that happens. If a default judgment is entered, there's usually no way to appeal that. Appeals, I don't believe, go through that well on default judgments. So you are basically forced to, whatever outcome the court came with, and you are bound to follow through with that, or serious consequences will come. So, that's also another thing that you have to keep in mind with how the courts work, especially in civil proceedings that are not criminal. Criminal proceedings are different. Civil proceedings, that's generally how it works. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than Howard Mendelson. And Howard puts in a second support of the night, and a huge shout to you, Howard, for that support once again. And also, sorry we could not read off the first one, by the way, once again. And Howard said, are you guys prepared with snow shovels, rock salt, gloves, and good snow boots? And no, I have none of those things, but I'll manage, though. I'll have to use my bare hands, I guess you have to say. But sadly, I don't have those things, no.
And I don't have those either, Howard Milson. I think I'm going to have to go out and get them, though, because I know that the snow is coming. It hasn't come heavy yet. It's coated the mountains now. It's basically frosted them, but it hasn't made it down into the valley yet. So we'll have to get some of that here soon. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running once again. And I also saw 1985 Belmondo say it's ridiculous for a judge to accept $1 billion claim. I got to say this, though. It's more ridiculous that the defendant doesn't even show up to court that day. Coming from a legal family where our dad was an attorney and we just grew up listening to this stuff our entire life, that is absolutely absurd to not have the defense show up on the day of the trial. Like, that's more absurd than the $1 billion claim, honestly. The court is the law of this land. It is a representative of the people. It is the arbiter of judgment. It is where you go to settle disputes. If there is a dispute, you cannot back off of it once it reaches the court system. You have to confront it. So just sitting there and acting like you're going to ignore it and it goes away, that not only is just legally ignorant, but that is just straight up fatal for most people. It was fatal in that case, in this hypothetical scenario at least. That was absolutely fatal. I mean, that's like coming from a legal family. It is unbelievable that someone would not show up to court. That is just insane. And so whatever judgment the court wants to go with at that point, it's not just for the case itself. It's really more so punitive at that point, because who the hell would be stupid enough to not show up to court? You would have to be absolutely stupid. You've completely lost the favor of the judge at that point, by the way. You were insulting the judge as well. By not showing up to court, you're completely disrespecting the court. You're completely disrespecting the state. You're disrespecting the people at that point of the nation. It's like at that point, the gloves are off. Even the judge is after you with that default judgment. So whatever they ask for, they get it. Well, at least the plaintiff would. So, just keep that in mind, folks. There is no such thing as evading the court. Because if you disrespect the court and don't even show up on the day of your trial, oh goodness, that's going to end up poorly. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Ross Nib. And thank you very much, Ross, for that $50 support as well. And he said, thank you for all you do, fellas, and LSA.
And thank you so much for enjoying all we do, Ross Nib. You're an old guard and a channel legend. We thank you massively for being here and enjoying what we do, because we love to do it every single night. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. Hope that does address that incredibly well. And we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $30 support from Marion Deemer. Excuse me, by the way, for that cough. But thank you very much, Marion, for that $30 support and also helping to keep the channel going. And Marion said, stay honest. Hugs and Slava Ukraine and Hiram Slava.
And thank you so much for support, Marion Deemer. And we will stay honest, as we always have. We try and be as flat out and honest with folks as we can be, and I hope that we always have been. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $20 support from Michelle Esquera, who puts in that 20. And thank you very much, Michelle, for that support. And she said, Merry Christmas, Andrew and Matthew.
Hey, and Merry Christmas to you as well. I hope everyone's going to have a great Christmas here. It's only about 12 days away at this point, so less than 2 weeks. So hopefully everyone will be having a very Merry Christmas. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 20 from Ilan Welemalua. And I'm trying to see if I'm saying that properly. Let's see here. Let me go back to it so I can get the original language here. Let's see here. I'm scrolling up. It's Ilan Welemalua, 7358. 60 something. What is that? Is that let's see here. Hold on a second. This currency is unfamiliar. A shekel.
Rupee?
Oh, it's Israeli shekel. Israeli new shekel. So 60 Israeli new shekels. Thank you very much, Ilan, for that support, by the way. We do appreciate that. And they put in a super sticker and said goal. And also, that's their first ever super chat on the stream, by the way.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. Folks like you are making this thing possible, and we thank you massively for it. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 20 from Lee and Kate, who puts in that 20. And thank you very much for that support as well. They said, why is the U.S. taking such a soft stand on freedom now? And why turn on those you fought so hard for in the past? And what was it all for the leader of the free world to no longer be the leader of the free world anymore?
That's a good rhetorical question, and I think we all know the answers. But a huge thanks to you for the support, and I have to say, that's a good question, but I think the answers are so obvious I don't even have to go over them. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 20 from Rye Guy SR. And a big shout to you, good sir, as well for that support. He said, another great show, and I'm glad I could make it. And do you guys ever see a point where the USA is completely out of Ukraine's picture? And could we possibly then see European boots on the ground inside Ukraine and LLT LSA? And I'll be honest, right, guy. I don't ever see the U.S. being out of the picture with Ukraine. We will always be involved with that situation, positive or negative. We will be involved in some way or another. So I don't see any scenario, by the way, where European boots are on the ground inside of Ukraine outside of the event of Russia attacking a European state directly with like drones or missiles or something like that. I simply don't see that happening. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree with Enforcer Matt on both of those points, so I hope that does address that well on both of our behalf. And a big thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $20 support from Burbo. And Burbo said, nobody expects the Mexican LSA. And do you guys believe the USA will actually do military operations against Venezuela? Or is it all a mind game to force Maduro and his cartel lords to make a stupid move out of desperation?
And a big shout out to the Mexican contingent of the LSA. And to answer the question, I don't know. It's up in the air at this point. I'll be honest, I just don't have a lot of faith in the administration's ability to follow through on anything. So I have a feeling that we're probably going to end up doing nothing to Venezuela at this point because we haven't done anything at all, and it's been almost 4 months now, and we're still sitting around doing nothing. So I'm doubting that we'll ever do anything because by now we have so many forces in the area, we could have done anything and everything under the sun, and we're still not doing anything, which is leading me to believe that this may have been a bluff and a waste of time and money. But a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to none other than Live Animal, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Live Animal, for that support. He said, why doesn't the U.S. administration send Woodcall for the peace plan to Syria, just like the one they sent on behalf of Ukraine?
Oh, man, I wonder. That's a good question. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 15 from Abdullah Siraj, who said, will Tom Alexandrovich be extradited to the U.S.?
Unfortunately, I had to declare ignorance on that particular situation because I actually don't know a lot about it. But I do thank you for the support, but sadly, I just don't know enough about that to be able to answer your question well with some confidence there. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Nightmare Before Christmas, who puts in a 10. And they said, I see someone in the UK doing advertising for defense companies again this week. Got to get one last big drone order done in 2025 if you want that Christmas bonus and LSA.
I suppose so. Someone out there's like, oh my God, we've got to up the sales. Quick, put out some billboards. Maybe some guy who's in acquisitions will be driving down the road. But a big thanks to you so much for the support. Pretty funny, honestly. And a huge thanks to you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, folks, we've had another heckler. It's time. Y'all know the rules, folks. Tonight, it's time for another heckler put down. Prime Beef said, you are all good about diarrhea mouth. What would your foreign policy be if enough dipshits were to vote you in as president of the United States? Would you broadcast your intentions? Living up to the name Prime Beef, by the way. Apparently, they got a Prime Beef with us. But I also got to say that they know a lot about beef because they've been taking it a lot recently as well. So with that, that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
They must be rich because beef is expensive. So they must be rich. They must fall into that category I was talking about earlier of bastard. But anyways, jumping into our next one here. This one goes to Mr. FAK9R, who put in a 10. And thank you very much, Mr. FAK, for that support. And he said, oh, we can't touch this top with a 10-foot pole, Mr. FAK. We definitely cannot touch this one right here. It involves elections, and we can't touch it. So thank you very much for that support, by the way. But sadly, we can't address it. But moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Telemosaic, who puts in a 10 and says, can you tell us a story about the white and the gold song at the end and beginning of the streams? And I love the music.
Ah, I see you know your anthems well. Good one. And you, sir, are you ready to receive my fine composition? But to answer the question about the white and gold is the anthem of our channel, or really the community of the channel, which is the Leaf Spring Army. It was composed by me, and then I had to sit there, and it drove me crazy, because this was years ago. I had to get a little subscription to Suno AI, and I sat there, and I think I have 90-something different versions of that song, because I just kept putting it into the system over and over and over until it got close, almost identical to what I was really thinking it should sound like in my head. Because I sat there and wrote the lyrics, and I was like, I want it to be kind of I wanted to sound proud, I wanted to sound a certain way, so I was writing it. I was like, from beginnings bold to future, like it was like a different composition a little bit, but it got close enough that Sono AI put it out, and I was like, there we go. I was like, that's it. And that's the one with the choir in it. That's the one that still plays at the end of the stream. That's the actual original version of the LSA anthem after I composed the lyrics and then put it into an AI about 100 times and then got the one I was looking for. So then after that, it became a pretty popular song, at least amongst the community. And it appears that it's actually gotten a following now because, crazily enough, a lot of people ask about that song every night during the countdown, and they're like, what song is that at the beginning of the stream? And I'm honestly kind of honored that people think it's good enough to ask, because I literally wrote the lyrics for that song and then tried to compose it through the AI. But then I got with a composer named Marcos Barilari, who works with Disney, and I asked him if he could take the AI version and then recompose it into a real orchestrated version. So then he did that, and then we went to Budapest Scoring in Budapest, Hungary, which, by the way, did the soundtrack for Squid Game and a whole bunch of other movies, and then we had them actually do the orchestral take of it that you hear at the beginning of the show. So the LSA anthem was actually composed, at least the instrumental version, by a Disney Pixar composer. Then it was actually orchestrated by the same orchestra that did the Squid Game soundtrack, and I think the soundtrack for the movie Die Hard and a whole bunch of others. And then we finally had it in the intros of the show as an actual orchestrated real anthem. I wish we could do a choir, but it's just out of the budget. It would be very expensive to do a choir on top of that instrumental. But that is basically the story of the LSA anthem. I tried to make the lyrics somewhat inspiring and kind of dedicated to what the channel is in a way, and also make the lyrics a little bit more poetic than what you hear in a lot of songs in the modern day, which are very direct in my opinion. Like, you know, because I have this certain idea, folks, of what music ought to be. I'm very big into music, and that's something I actually don't talk about at all, is that I listen to all kinds of music, literally anything and everything, and I listen to it and I study it and I think about it and I'm like, wow, that sounds so good. And orchestral music is some of my favorite. So, you know, I find a lot of interest in like the songs of Mozart and others, but beyond that, I was like, it needs to sound bold, it needs to be orchestral, and it needs to sound somewhat traditional, and it needs to have a very proud and kind of honestly a very formidable sound to it. And that they finally came out. The composer Barilari, he did great on actually getting that to where it was supposed to be, what I was actually wanting, and he did an amazing job at it. But you know, and I was writing the lyrics and I was like, how in the world should the lyrics go? So if you've never heard the lyrics before, folks, there is a community post buried on the channel from years ago that actually laid out the only stanza of lyrics that the anthem has. It's one stanza repeated twice, but this is the lyrics. From beginnings bold to futures untold, the white and gold will forever unfurl. Our armies will lead us steadfast, united forever into those futures untold, futures unknown. For the Lee Spring army will stand up bold as the battles rage soundly whirl. Our armies will lead us steadfast forever into the futures untold, futures unknown. And then it just repeats a second time, but that's the lyrics of the song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta add the ad libs.
Come here, B. Get on your knees. Man, wait, hang on, man. Let me do the right lyric. Tell I ain't got no plea, law. You know I ain't got no. But anyways.
Also, by the way, if y'all know what we're referencing, by the way, we happened to come across a meme of two gentlemen, trying to rap a song. I don't know why it was suggested on our feed, but we got it, and it was two gentlemen who really couldn't pull it together in this song, to say the least. Couldn't understand what they were saying, but I could only make out a couple of words here and there, and it was kind of debaucherous, to say the least. And also, it was pretty bad. It's making the rounds. I think it's going viral or something. Not for the right reasons. It's just so bad.
Man, I live. Oh man, like kind of like that. But Beyond that, I'd have to say, folks, that is basically all the details I can give you all about the LSA anthem. Apparently, it's a favorite of many. And also, Butchie777 said, beautiful voice of it. You're BSing. Like, you're BSing. I was doing terribly with that, and I do not do good at singing at all. I don't think I'll ever do good at singing. But beyond that, one thing I will say is I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that answers your questions about the LSA anthem. I've got to say, folks, I have some personal favorites in the LSA anthem, like the actual orchestrated version, because the AI version was okay. It was okay, but the orchestrated version to me is the magnum opus of what it was actually supposed to be. I just wish that we could raise the money to, and also we don't ever raise money on the channel, but like in my mind, I wish there was a way we could raise the money and earmark it specifically to go and hire a choir to then dub over the instrumental and add to it. Because I would love to actually have that fully orchestrated to where you can actually hear the lyrics as well, rather than just the instrumental at the start. And I would like to do that for the Star Spangled Banner too. But you know, it's just a shame. It costs a lot of money, folks. The intro cost $10,000 to make the way it is right now, and that means, folks, that we're running in that intro over $1,000 a minute for just an instrumental. So it's very expensive, and doing an choir is even more expensive because it's doubling or almost tripling the price of getting a finished song. So while I was able to manage, and I mean hardly manage, funding the intro to make it our own, I cannot really manage doing a choir. Like, that actually will require fundraising to do, and considering that we don't do fundraising for the channel, that's pretty much never going to happen. So I hope that does address that the best I can. But maybe one day we can see about actually having a choir put on that. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jack ALN, and he puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much for the support, by the way, as well. He said, Maker's Mark is my favorite bourbon. It was discounted a lot here in Melbourne lately. I wonder why. LOL. Merry Christmas to you all. Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. And Jack, I have no idea what that was until I saw a picture. I just pulled it up. And I know that one because they dip it in that red wax. And that's iconic. So I really didn't know until I saw that picture. And I was like, instantly knew what you were talking about. But discounted, eh? Discounted around Christmas. I wonder. And that's interesting. But and what do you say? Enforcer, what do you say?
Man, they're out there in Australia going, God rest you, merry gentlemen. Man, I mean, like, damn. That's a discounted Maker's Mark. I've never actually had Maker's Mark before, but I do know that wax deal that Matthew's talking about on the bottles, and it looks pretty cool, honestly. But I do thank you massively for the support and sharing that with us. It's very interesting to hear. And a big thanks to you once again for helping this channel to keep running all the way from Melbourne, Australia. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have another $10 support from Rye Guy SR. And he said, so we draw the line for online ads at train mats and rugs. Anything more not needed and unwanted? I'm dying laughing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I have a very specific niche of things that I look at when I'm not on the show. I either look at military stuff, railroad stuff, model railroad stuff, history stuff, and maybe, I'm trying to think of something else, maybe some gun-related stuff, but not really that much anymore. That's basically the 5 things that I look at off air. So whenever I get ads for anything that's not that, I'm like, why the hell am I getting ads for this? Because I've never looked at that. And I just don't know why, because everywhere I go, I get like the train rugs and stuff, the ads for that, and some model train stuff, but then I'll get like the wackiest ads that I've ever seen, and I just don't even know why, because I've never looked at anything that would even lead in a predictive algorithm to think that I would want that. Like medicine for hair loss. I'm not balding. Like, why in the world do I get like the advertisements for the hair loss pills? I'm not losing my hair. I'm not even balding. It's like, why do I
Are you sure?
Oh yeah, I'm absolutely sure, man. I got a thick head of hair, and it's not going anywhere. I don't have a receding hairline. Huh? But beyond that, I don't have a receding hairline or anything. You know, it's like, I'm not balding. And it's also like, I've never even looked into that. Or why in the world do I get stuff for the mange? It's like, I'm not mangy. I haven't had the mange. Like, why the hell is it giving me ads for medicine for the mange? And then it was giving me a whole bunch of other stuff too. Like, it was the stupidest thing. I was looking at the ads on Flight Radar, folks, and I was just absolutely bewildered where the hell it was getting the ideas for these ads. Like, I took the thing off air because some people brought up like an ad that was on air in the show, and then it was like ads for the mange, balding, like the plague, and then just other stuff that I've never looked at all. Like, I don't even know how in the world to describe the rest of the stuff, because I just remember looking at it and being so bewildered I couldn't even remember most of the stuff. But I was like, how the hell am I getting these ads? Nothing would lead a predictive algorithm to think I'd ever want any of this stuff. So you know, it's very, very annoying to me. Oh, what the hell is this? But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that is somewhat well, because it is very annoying to me, the ads. I don't like them. But the big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
I think all the ads I get, I can't even remember what kind of ads I get. I'll be honest, I have YouTube Premium, so I don't see ads. So you know, that's the benefit of having that. Honestly, you don't have to see them. They're a thing of the past. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here. This one goes to Mechtild, who puts in a 10. He said, "Fun fact: Carol of the Bells originated in Ukraine." And search YouTube for the 2 documentaries about this, and one from the chat if you can. Heart, Barbara.
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting. That is true. Carol of the Bells did actually come from Ukraine. It actually had a different name in Ukrainian, but they changed the name to Carol of the Bells to make it more marketable to a Western audience, and specifically an English-speaking audience. But it actually had different lyrics and a different title under the Ukrainian version, but the same composition, which is very interesting. And I find Christmas songs to be very interesting, folks, because a lot of them have origins that are very new. Pretty much every Christmas song comes from about the past 150 years, and there's basically hardly any that come from before that period. Very few. Green Sleeves is one of them, and one of the very few. Because a lot of people actually don't know this, but Christmas was not celebrated the way we celebrated until about the 1840s and 50s. And one thing that's crazy, folks, is that there is one singular book, that changed the entire Christmas holiday in the English-speaking world forever. Do you know which one that is, Matthew?
And so it's a holiday for what?
It's a book that changed how Christmas is celebrated in the English-speaking world since it was written. Do you know what book it is?
The Bible.
No, it was A Christmas Carol.
Okay.
You know, A Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge, all that stuff.
Oh, you're talking. That's the name of it.
Yeah, by Charles Dickens.
Okay.
That changed the entire way that Christmas was celebrated. As a matter of fact, it actually brought the good tithings idea into Christmas, which didn't exist really before then. Christmas was more so just kind of like a meal. It was almost like a second Thanksgiving in a way for most of history, especially in the modern era from about the 1600s on up until about the 1840s. But after A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens became incredibly popular, it really changed the way that Christmas is celebrated a whole lot. Because at the end of the movie, Ebenezer Scrooge starts to get very kind, and he starts to give out gifts to the people he knows, like Cratchit and Tiny Tim and all of that. He starts being a nice person and being virtuous and kind during the holidays, because otherwise he was going to burn in hell. So that's what started to change a lot of how Christmas was done. And that's also where all the Christmas carols came from. Like God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, on Christmas night, on Christmas Eve, tomorrow brings the pleasure we seek. You know, all that deal. It's like all those Christmas carols come from after that book was written. And they all generally echo the themes that were in A Christmas Carol. And if you look into it as well, another thing that came around in the 1860s was the Christmas tree, which was brought into vogue by Queen Victoria, who had a Christmas tree put up, I believe, in Windsor Castle or Buckingham Palace, one or the other. But it became popular enough, and then it was brought into vogue because, look, it's the Queen doing it. Obviously, it's now in vogue. So then everyone started to do it in Britain, and then it came over to America. So the Christmas holiday as we celebrate it now, it's only about 140 years old, really. Christmas has been around since Christ died, but the way we celebrate it, it's only about a 150-year-old holiday in its modern form. So, really interesting sort of a thing to think about there. Also, yeah, you are right, Sax. It was Prince Albert, not Queen Victoria, that did that. So thank you for correcting me there. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can about the Christmas holiday. But Christmas is a very interesting holiday. Me personally, it's my favorite holiday of the year. My next favorite would probably be the 4th of July. Well, it is the 4th of July. I'm very American, as you can tell. But beyond that, Christmas is a very good holiday. I think it's a great one, and it's a hallmark, really, especially of the British cultures primarily, and it's really a hallmark holiday for the entire Western world, really, or a keystone holiday, more so to say. But I hope that does address that well. Big thanks to you once again. And Matthew, how many more do we have left?
We have about 8 left.
Oh, that's not too bad. That's actually someone, man. Oh, goodness. It's Tiny Tim. He's sick. Father. Man,
Oh, jeez. Also, by the way, folks, since Mechtild, Barbara mentioned something originating in Ukraine, the song there, something else that originated in Ukraine is pretty cool that some people may have heard of is something called a sherp. Which you can pull a picture of that up if you like to show the folks what that is. It's like a really capable off-road 4x4. I think they call it an ATV, I think. But there it is right there. That company actually started in Kyiv, Ukraine. And there's a place around here, actually. I know some people that actually have a few of these sherps right here, local to Salt Lake City. And I was wondering if maybe people would like to see a video of this Ukrainian machine in action. That might be something cool to film a video about.
That might be pretty cool, actually, if we could get someone to drive one of these around. But they are an incredibly neat vehicle, and they also can come with trailers.
Now, that is sick right there. I like that a lot. That is cool.
This looks like an Arctic exploring vehicle with a trailer attached, really.
Yeah, I think that might have been.
Huh. That's pretty cool, though. I think that is absolutely...
I like that color, though. That color is just absolutely goated.
I mean, it is absolutely goated. The white looks good on this thing. But you know, there's so many interesting things to talk about, folks, when it comes to Ukraine and Christmas. But I do hope that we address that well for now. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And also, they can float, by the way. It doesn't look like it should be able to float, but apparently it can float, from what I've heard, which is pretty cool, by the way. Also, that thing can get over anything. That thing is probably as capable, if not more capable, in my personal opinion, than a Unimog, which is also an extremely capable truck that I think Mercedes makes. But they're both very, very capable. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Mark Dixon, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Mark, for that $10 support. And we do appreciate it. And also a big shout out to Crispy for throwing in a 5. And we also appreciate you very much as well.
And thank you to the both of y'all for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And I hope we were able to address that quite well. And we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 7 from Michael Haskins. And he said, Ukraine did a full drone tank thing attack. I don't think I've heard it again. Flying drones, but no ground flamethrower machine gun drones like that move.
Oh, they're working on those. They actually do have the machine gun ground-based drones, and they also are working on a flamethrower one, but I don't think that one's ever going to be used in mass. They are very niche in how they can be used tactically. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 7 from the Wild Canadian guy who said, Ukraine did... Wait a minute. Did I just read that one? Whoa, what in the world? Let's see. What's going on here? Hold on a second. It's duplicated the message. Let's see whose message has been duplicated. Let me go back and investigate real quick. Let's see here. The Wild Canadian guy, looking for his super chat real quick. Something has gone awry. Something is, a creature is stirring. So Wild Canadian guy said that. So Michael Haskins must have said something different. Let's see what's going on. Let's see. Michael Haskins, calling Michael Haskins. Is he in the building? And where the hell's the super chat at?
Man, that reminded me of that Twilight Zone episode, man, where it was like, I did it. I became the #1 pool player. And then it cut to the next scene, calling Mr. Haskins to pool table 7 in Cleveland. And then he had to get up and go and like keep competing with people because he became the best pool player ever.
Also, by the way, where are you? Michael Haskins super chat's not even in this thing. Like, do you see it on your end? Because I'm not seeing it. Something weird's going on with this.
You're about to enter a world of strange shit. But let's see. Michael Haskins. What value is the super chat? Is it 10, 5?
It was a $7 super chat.
7. So it ought to be in that teal color. I'm not seeing one from Michael Haskins, at least in the super chat spread that we get on YouTube.
So I don't know what the hell is going on with this, but a huge shout out to Michael Haskins and the Wild Canadian guy for throwing in those supports right there. I'll be honest with you, I've never seen this happen. The spreadsheet doesn't have it right, and also your super chat's not even showing up in the YouTube panel. So I'm not even sure where I got that from, to be honest. I'm not even sure what's going on, but let us know, though, if you left a message, and we will address it anyway. But we also have a 5 from Bruce Lee, who said, see, the A10 is still capable, it's still usable, or something. That's supposed to talk about the Fight Club, LSA.
Oh, God. Oh, what have you done? You've read it off on air. They're all going to start fighting each other. It has its place. It has its place. I'm just going to leave it at that. It's good at some things, not good at others. But a big thanks to you for the support and help with this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Dan Brooks, who said Maduro started watching when he heard a beautiful blonde start making appearances.
Oh, you're talking about Nicky Maduro. Oh, yes, Nicky Maduro, real eye catcher. I like the mustache. But still, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, by the way, let's see here. Pianfar, he said, Matt, I left you a song to look at. It's Susan Tedeschi by Fly from Montgomery. I will have to check that out, Pianfar. I've not heard of that singer right there, but I'll have to check that out and hear it. Also, by the way, I was trying to see here. Yeah, I'll have to check that out right there. Boca Raton, it looks like. Interesting. But yeah, I'll check it out. But also, by the way, we also have one more super chat here. Actually, 2 more super chats. One from Dubstep Kid 801 and on Plazath, who put in a $3 and a $1 support. And thank you very much, Dubstep Kid and Plazath, for that support. And we also have a 2 from Parbate Potato, who said, Ukrainian Drone Simulator just came out on Steam.
Hooray! And thank you for the support. We'll take a look into that. And so, a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. I hope I says. And with that, it's time for us to move on and into the next one.
And that is actually our last super chat for right now. And also a note on Part Baked Potatoes super chat. I have gotten in touch with the folks who developed that game, by the way, Ukrainian Drone Simulator. They had sent us an email, and I responded to it. So we will see. We may be able to do a video on that, actually, about that whole game right there. So we're seeing what the thing is with it and how it's going to work. I think you have to have a controller like that you hook up to your computer to run it, because I don't think you can do it on a keyboard, because that would be very complex to do that with like the up and down arrow keys and stuff like that, because flying a drone is extremely tricky. So I think you actually have to have a proper FPV controller to even play that. I think Denis Davidov actually played that on his YouTube channel. I saw a video, I think it was on his personal channel, where he tried that game out. I think it was the same one. It looked like he had a controller that he was playing it with.
Yeah, I mean, we could upload that to Patreon as like a free to access thing to where it's not behind a paywall, and do it there. So that way it's not on the main channel, because like whenever we do anything, folks, that's not a short war video or a stream on the main channel, YouTube goes, what is that? And then they like deprioritize us in the algorithm for like a whole month afterwards. So we could do it. It's just that we would have to do it on Patreon probably, and then just put a link in the description below the streams to send you all to it and let you all take a look at it. But I hope that does address that well, and a big thanks to you for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And it's time to jump into our Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Jonah Dog, Norm President, Airbug Garbo, Roy Fluffins, Coach Cobra, Derek Siren, Brian Blairstown. And they said the Morse code says, our condolences to the soldiers of our nation who have died protecting the citizenry, LLT, LSA.
And long live the Lee Spring Army, and that is the Morse code message of the night. Incredibly unfortunate to hear about the passing of those service members inside of Palmyra, and it's an incredible tragedy, but at the same time, if it wasn't for those boys out there who were dying sometimes from ambushes and attacks like these, this nation wouldn't be able to stand tall like it does every day around the entirety of the world, and to be able to see that the citizenry of the country have a good life. So an incredibly unfortunate thing to hear, but it is the price of freedom, and it's the price to be in a country like ours. But a big thanks to y'all so much once again for getting that Morse code message correct. And with that, folks, we're going to be answering 3 live chat questions due to us going overtime, and then we're going to be rounding out the stream for the night. So we're on to the third to last question of the night.
And many people said, including Bruce Lee, Ms. Deesa, and several others, so is this proof that the A-10 is still viable? We don't talk about that. Honestly, I'll say this. I'll make this very, very simple right here. Me personally, I think the A-10 has its place. I don't think they should retire it. I think they should keep it. It's certainly doing some heavy work right now inside of Syria, and it's unleashing hell on the people that we believe carried out the attack on the soldiers. Me personally, I think the A-10 is a fantastic weapon for its certain use case. But the problem is, though, there are a couple of problems. It is slow. That's one problem with it. And also, by the way, it's very vulnerable, at least in my personal opinion, to getting shot at from ground-based air defenses. I think we saw it shooting off some of the flares in that video earlier, which is obviously one of its defenses to ground-based air defense. But that's not a catch-all necessarily. So it's got its place, but it's not like an all-rounder. But Enforcer, what say you?
I've just got to say, folks, the A-10 is obsolete. Like, that's why it's used at night, and it's used in places that have uncontested air superiority like Syria, is that it's basically useless in every other aspect. The more of them were shot down in the Gulf War by friendly fire and also by enemy fire than any other aircraft. That was in the 90s. In the 2000s in Iraq, in Afghanistan, the only places that we would use the A-10s were places that had uncontested air superiority, and we would also use them to fly over units that we believe to have had low morale to try and improve their morale. You know, it's great for propaganda, I'll be honest. It's a really cool plane, but as far as it being used on the battlefield these days, like, you know, if I'm just being honest about it, I think the A-10 has had its day, and it's just no longer a usable platform. That's definitely been seen in Ukraine with the Russian Su-25. The Su-25, which is Russia's equivalent of the A-10, and it travels at an even faster speed. The Russian Su-25 can get up to around 630 miles an hour, and even it's obsolete. The A-10 only gets up to about 440, and that's usually in a dive. It usually only gets up to about 370 to 400 miles an hour in speed. That is so slow, it's quite literally a sitting duck. And on top of that, it doesn't have the ability to conduct any evasive maneuvers when taking ground fire. The titanium bathtub only protects the pilot, not the actual aircraft. The aircraft is heavily impervious to ground fire, and it also presents a fairly easy target even for heavy machine gun fire. It has a place, but it is incredibly niche. It is as niche as using something like a Super Tucano, or something along those lines. It has a role, but it's just not as big a role as it used to be back when it was first introduced in the service in the mid-70s. So I hope that addresses that well, in my opinion, although that's the only time we're ever going to touch on this topic. We're leaving it to rest after this, but that's my opinion. I just don't have a good opinion of the A-10, and I think that other platforms like the F-35, the F-16, and the F-15 can do the job of the A-10 and also protect their pilots far more effectively than an A-10 ever could. But I hope that has addressed that well, and with that, we are on to the second to last question. Huh? What? Huh? But with that, we're on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, so that's it. I've had it, folks. I'm unsubscribing. I am unsubscribing, me personally. I'm unsubscribing from the idea that the A-10 was ever something that really had a place in the first place. I'm unsubscribing. I'm subscribing to the idea that the A-10 should be the world's only attack aircraft left. We should use that as the only one. We should ban all other aircraft, including the F-35, and we should simply use the A-10 for everything, because that would level the playing field, and it would maintain the preservation of the famous brrr, because we have to have that. We always have to have the GAL. The GAL cannot die. We must have GAL. But anyways, I'm joking. But jumping on to our next one here, our second to last live chat of the night, this one is going to go to none other than Space Fraggle, who said, could it have been possibly Russian forces that ambushed the American forces in Syria?
Highly unlikely. There really isn't any Russian forces in Syria anymore, outside of the small little number of them that are still at the Latakia International Airport, but it technically goes under a different name, and I'm trying to think of the name. It's like it's the Hmenin Airfield. That's what it is. There's a small amount of them here, but the rest of them left Syria a while ago, so it would be highly unlikely. It's not out of the question, but extremely unlikely. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be none other than Slothers, who said, Matt, do you think the current U.S. government will ever get on friendly terms with the EU again, or should we wait for the next government? Slothers, here is my prediction, and this is a Matt prediction. Take it with a grain of salt. These predictions are simply be taken with heavy grains of salt, but this is my current take on it. I believe that the U.S. is going to go through this current phase it's going through right now, which is basically demolishing and ripping apart relations with our allies, especially in the EU. And it's going to temporarily be okay. in the short term. But after about a year or two, while this current leadership's still in office, it's probably going to start showing some very damaging results to our economy, also going to show some damaging results to our overall defense posture against our adversaries like Russia and China, because they'll be emboldened to do things that they wouldn't have done if we were cohesive as the alliance. So my guess is this. Before the current leadership is out of term or out of office, they will probably end up reversing their stance on the EU because it'll be so detrimental to the United States that they'll have to. That's my prediction. But we're looking at maybe a year or two down the road before that happens, which who knows what kind of damage is going to take place to the U.S. before that gets reversed. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I don't really have that positive of an outlook on the future of the current administration as well. The truth is that we have only been through year 1 of 4 years of this, and it's already going quite badly in year 1. So I'll be honest, I think this is probably going to keep going like this for the next 3 years, and we're probably going to see that the U.S. is going to be close to alienated from most of our sphere of influence at this point within a very short amount of time, or the relationship is going to be so strained that if a new administration doesn't come in and masterfully recover the situation, we probably will end up losing our sphere of influence as it exists, which would be detrimental to the United States. Anyone who says otherwise is a fool, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they wouldn't know their head from a hole in the ground. And I'm not saying that just to sound like we're making an extreme statement. People who truly do say that the United States would be fine without Europe and without all of our allies in Asia and elsewhere, they are too stupid for their own good. They don't know how the world works. They don't even know why they have a job and they're making money and what goes into the giant big picture of that. They have no clue, and they don't know what they're talking about. So I would have to say it's probably not going to end up too well, to be entirely honest. So, the Congress can take actions, to secure America's interest, or we'll just see it goes how it goes, and we'll have to try and recover the situation after it's been torpedoed, one or the other. So, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. I will say this, though. I think, folks, the Congress is kind of getting a little bit tired of the stupidity, because the NDAA that came out today is starting to show that this whole foreign policy approach that's going on right now isn't popular with anyone, apparently, in Congress. So, there's a possibility things could get bad enough that, a change of leadership might be coming a little bit sooner rather than later. But that's of course a crapshoot, but it might happen if things got bad enough to an extreme. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, folks, we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for watching. It is an absolute honor and an incredible pleasure to know that so many people continue to choose this channel to be their primary source of news. Tonight we had 12.2 thousand people here at the peak, and 115,000 people have watched this channel before it ended. I've got to say that we are massively appreciative and honored to know that so many people continue to spend their time here on the channel and consider this to be their primary source of news. We will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world, and to also make our Sunday fundraiser a reality again for about the 150th time, I believe. And, of course, folks, if we have enough news to make a short war video tomorrow, I, the Enforcer, will be the one making the short war video. And so with that, we will see you all then. So with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukrainian, Ram Slava, long live the East Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all once again for watching, and all 115,000 plus people that are here tonight. That's one of our biggest viewership nights by the end of the stream in a big long time, actually. And we appreciate every single one of you very much for choosing us as your news source. And we will see you tomorrow on that short war video if there is enough news to cover, and definitely tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the Sunday night fundraiser stream, and also for another night of news. But with that, thank you all for joining us once again tonight, and Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.